Morning fun. All right, welcome to the March 10th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Supervisors, Placer County. I obviously need more coffee. Good morning, everyone. We will begin with a flag salute, so if you would please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we will begin with the consent agenda, and I'll have the clerk read the motion.
All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by the County Executive Department. All items will be approved by a single roll call vote. Anyone may ask to address consent items prior to the board taking action, and the item may be moved for discussion.
Thank you. Is there any items that anyone would like to remove? None from board members, and anyone from the public? All right, well then we will move approval from Supervisor Holmes. Second by Supervisor Wygant. Roll call, please.
Wygant?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Euler? Aye. Gustafson?
Aye.
Gore?
Aye. Look at that. Because Supervisor Euler says aye, now three of us say aye. Well, maybe we'll actually get the whole board to say aye instead of yes. We'll see if that happens.
Yes.
It's not National Pirate Day, but when it is, remind us. Okay, let's see. This is time for public comment. So if anybody from the public has a comment on an item that is not on our agenda, this is that time to come and speak to our board. So do we have any members from the public who would like to address us? No? All right. Well, then we will close public comment. And
Has this ever happened in Tahoe? No.
almost always there's public comment in Auburn from Tahoe.
This is the fewest number of people I've ever seen.
Right.
It's because we're doing an amazing job. There you go. All right, board member and county executive reports. Any reports out from board members? And Todd?
No items.
All right, then moving right along, except that our first timed item is 9:10 and it's 9:01, or 9:02, which absolutely never happens. And we don't have department items. Well, we could turn on music and sing a little.
We could go to, if you want to, close session for a little while, or we could just sit here and chat.
Might as well run through closed session because
Yeah, why don't we do that? So we'll close, we'll move to a closed session, at least a couple of the items.
The board will now adjourn to closed session to consider 3 items of existing litigation and 1 of anticipated litigation.
All right, and then we should hopefully be back here by 9:10 for our 9:10 items. So be right back, folks. All right, everyone, we are back. Thank you for your patience, and we will start with our 9:10 timed item. Report out from County Council first.
The board met in closed session to consider 3 items of existing litigation. On Human Rights Defense Center versus County, the board authorized the defense of the named defendants. On In re Leslie Beeland, the board authorized settlement. In re Brandy Belding, the board authorized settlement. Under anticipated litigation, the board authorized the initiation of litigation. That concludes report out of this portion of closed session.
Thank you. All right, now we'll move on to item 1A, which is the Squaw Valley Ski Museum Foundation Fiscal Year 2017-18 Tourism Master Plan Grant Award. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Erin Casey here today with the County Executive Office to present this item to you. Here's a brief summary of the presentation that I'm going to cover today. First, I'll just provide your board with a project summary. I know you're all very familiar with the project, but I do think it helps just to remind everyone here and those of us in the room about the project. The TOT Grant Awards, a little history on your board's support for the project over the years. More detail on the fiscal year 17 to 18 pending TOT grant. A brief project update of the grant agreement, and then board action. The proposed Snow Sports Museum is a 16,000 square foot facility. It will include exhibit space and a visitor information desk. It will also include a multi-purpose room for events, theater, meeting hall, and event space. It may also include a gift shop, bookstore, and snack bar. And as you all know, the preferred site for the museum is at Squaw Valley Park, which the county does own. A little bit on the TOT funding history. There's a long history of support for the project by your board, as well as the community and the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association, starting as far back as March 2008, when your board approved a $12,000 contribution of transient occupancy tax funds to support the project and the organization. The Ski Museum Foundation created or was a 501c3 or became a 501c3 with those funds, began developing a business plan for the project and hired consultants to support that work. Again, in 2008, the Resort Association recommended to your board an additional $100,000 allocation of TOT to support the project. The funds were to pay for a site evaluation, a museum master plan, and then estimate operation costs for future operations of the actual facility. March 2009, an additional $100,000 allocation to continue the museum master plan development, a business plan, a capital campaign, and then final site selection. In October of 2017, your board awarded the Museum Foundation with $125,000 in TOT funds to support architectural engineering studies and for the organization to complete work for the environmental questionnaire and submit that application to the Community Development Resources Agency. This application or this grant also included funds to support public outreach. More recently, on February 11th, 2020, your board awarded the organization with $225,000 in TOT funds as recommended by the Capital Projects Advisory Committee to complete architectural plans, continue with project management, and then to hire consultants for lighting, mechanical work, water, and sewer. I'm now going to provide your board with a brief summary of the fiscal year 17-18 grant that's been pending since that time. The application was submitted to the Capital Projects Advisory Committee in February of 2018 for the fiscal year 17-18 Tourism Master Plan grant cycle. The proposal was for $150,000 in TOT to fund permitting, environmental analysis, fundraising, and additional outreach. I do want to mention to your board that the initial application was actually for more funds, over $200,000, but the Museum Foundation responded to the CAP Committee's request to sharpen the pencil, if you will, and reduce the request because there were so many requests that year and not enough funds to support all the projects. So the organization responded to that and reduced their request to $150,000. The CAP Committee did recommend this allocation to your board. However, staff did recommend at that time placing those funds on a temporary hold because the environmental questionnaire application had not yet been completed, and we were uncertain about what level of environmental analysis would be required for the project. Your board did support that staff recommendation, and so the funds were placed in reserve at where they are today. A brief project update. There are representatives here today from the Museum Foundation, including Jill Milne, the Executive Director, who may come up and provide your board with an update after I conclude my remarks. The Museum Foundation submitted documents to the Community Development Resources Agency as required for the environmental questionnaire. They've been working diligently with CDRA staff over the last several months to respond to requests for additional information to complete the EQ. The final documents were submitted in late February of 2020. Jill Milne informed me of this last week. And for this reason, staff is recommending that your board release the pending grant from 1718 and allocate those funds to the Skew Museum Foundation. If your board takes action today and approves the staff recommendation, the $150,000 pending grant would be combined with the $225,000 grant that your board just approved in February into one grant agreement. That grant agreement would include a budget and scope of work, specific milestones and deliverables, which we talked about at the last board meeting when I did present the $225,000 request to your board. And those milestones would also include a schedule and an anticipated completion date. I've also been meeting with Jill to discuss some of these additions to the contract, and we will be meeting on a quarterly basis at a minimum. We may meet more frequently than that to streamline communication and continue to enhance our existing partnership. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and my remarks, and I will answer any questions that your board may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Let's see, no questions at this time.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and open it up to public comment. Would anyone from the public like to make a comment?
Good morning, Madam Supervisor and Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the opportunity to just give you a quick update on our accomplishments from 2019 and our goals for 2020. Just start off with, we are very excited and pleased to be able to report to you that we have completed the environmental questionnaire application, and that has been turned in. And that process took longer than we had anticipated, I think, on both sides, but the Placer staffing, there were some changes, and they have received that in their hands. I wanted to make a side note that the LSC engineering company, along with JKAE, did come up with, kind of went above and beyond, and when they were processing and assessing the current parking lot, they wanted us to consider, and they felt this was good for all the needs of the Squaw Valley Park, to consider future needs for bus transportation and a turnaround spot for educational purposes, for the school buses, and for any other transport. They did go ahead and make those recommendations as to what would take place, and we were pleased to state that it would only lose one parking spot, and it would be a very safe and utilized turnaround spot for bus transportation. In addition to that, when they completed the entire parking survey, they felt very confident that the space that the museum requires and what currently exists falls into the criteria of what the needs are. So just to kind of give you a quick bullet point recap from 2019 to just give you an idea of what we accomplished last year. We completed our 5-year strategic plan, which falls in line really well with being able to provide a tracking mechanism for the Board of Supervisors, for Placer County staff, Erin Casey and Caitlin Hopkins, to be able to track our success. We're pleased to be able to have that as a measurable component. We are also excited about launching our website. We've received a lot of traction on there. We've received an increased visibility and increased usership. As we move into 2020, we've increased our board of directors and our advisory board. We're pleased with some of our new members and their depth of background that they'll be providing to our objectives. We did establish an office for the director and interns to utilize in Truckee for the short term. We are hosting an event next Saturday, which we felt was really important to highlight the 60th anniversary of the 1960 Olympics. And I provided you each with a little flyer on that. That event is already going to be well attended. So we're excited to be able to showcase this incredible history and also learn from Olympians and athletes there. I think that a lot of the young athletes of today will really appreciate that. Moving into this year, we have a fireside chat strategy that we're going to be applying throughout the year, which is working with our community individuals and getting into the homes in all various neighborhoods in and around the greater Tahoe area to be able to get another way for public outreach to connect with them and have them understand what our goals and objectives are, and to be able to get more momentum and more interest in the museum project. And we, again, continue to retain and acquire more amazing memorabilia products, and we're housing that temporarily, but we look forward to finding ways where we can get many exhibits out into the community so they can start to see some of the products. Do you have any questions at this point? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes.
You know what? I do have a quick question. Your fundraising strategy, can you share that with us? Because as we look at the amount of money that's been invested, which is a good sum, and it's I'm glad that you've gotten to where you're at this point. It'd be helpful to know what your fundraising strategy is as you're moving forward, and that would be helpful to be aware
absolutely.
of.
I would invite Scott Keith up here, who's on my fundraising committee, also to help me speak to this. We have developed a really strong committee, and we have a strategic plan to be able to launch and reach out into a greater beyond Sierra Nevada region for acquiring strong operational funds and moving on towards really key sponsorships and partnerships with corporations to be able to acquire our next levels as we tier up to our capital campaign.
Yeah, Scott Keith. She mentioned the fireside chats. That's kind of strategy number one to execute immediately, which is getting into the interested parties who've been asking about what's going on and how they can help with the capital campaign. The capital campaign so far, we have $1 million saved for the work, and with the, excuse me, nervous. With the fireside chats, we're going to go back to the individuals who have said, we want to know more. We have people that can do investment, want to sponsor a building or events, and how do we do that? So that's part number one. Part number two was corporate sponsorship. And if you look at the 60 Olympics, we had big corporate partners like IBM. Who else was in there? Toyota. Microsoft. And Disney, of course, who have said, let us know when you're ready and have a place, and we'll get involved. So we're going to, now that we have location secure or semi-secure and also a plan and a website, we can go back to those guys and say, we have this in place, and we just set up the bigger fundraising committee to set up the documentation. And then part three is state level funding, and working with different lobbyists to say, how do we get to our state supervisor level or assembly and senate and work with them to see what kind of historical grants are available there.
We have about a dozen grant applications that we're working on right now that range from the California, Nevada, sort of statewide, up to regional and to government level. There are a lot of grants that we were not to be considered yet because of not having a land secured. There's certain steps that you need to have acquired, even though we're further along in other areas. Once we have the land solidified, it will really open the doors for us in regards to additional grants, fundings, and fundraising.
Great.
Maybe you could also
speak to your capital contribution that you already have.
That we currently have?
Yes.
I think, okay, so in general, ongoing individual donor funds range between $200,000 to $300,000 on an annual basis. As far as the fund that we have that we received from a foundation about 5 years ago, which has been accruing in a Merrill Lynch account, it is at $1 million. The operational funds that we seek are typically through grants, and that is just to help us maintain this permitting process that we've been underway, and also help us get a stronger branding platform so that we can get a greater reach.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
I wanted to follow up with another one. Jill, obviously, a lot of our emphasis on these TOT grants is for economic development, tourism services, and I'd love to see a great cooperation, this is for staff and for you all, between our economic development department, our parks department as well, and really see this as a partnership in how we move forward and how we create an attraction that serves the public well. And so whatever you can do to embrace partnership with our staff, and then for our staff to make sure we're coordinating with economic development and our parks department, because I know that was part of the holdup for the last few months, making sure that we're coordinating well and see the multi-purpose room, visitor information, other types of things that can help you succeed and help the county succeed in our goals and
Right,
mission.
excellent. No, that's an excellent suggestion. And I will work with Erin Casey on identifying who would be the individual contacts within the organizations and try to host something, I would say, within the next couple weeks so that we can get some ongoing communications started and help prepare them and educate them as to where we are now and where we'd like to be. I appreciate that.
One other partner in the room is Resort Association as well, North Lake Tahoe Resort Association.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We appreciate them very much. Thank you, Cindy.
All right, looks like no more questions for you all. Any other comments from the public? All right, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board, and we've got a request to approve the pending fiscal year 2017-18 tourism master plan grant for $150,000.
So moved.
Motion by Gustafson, second by Holmes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No abstentions? All right, motion
Great.
carries. Thank you
Thank
very much
you.
for the update. We appreciate it. All right, we will move to the 9:25 timed item, which is the annual updates from the North Tahoe Business Association and the Tahoe City Downtown Association. Good morning.
Good morning. Emily Setzer with the County Executive Office in Tahoe. We're here today with the executive directors of the North Tahoe Business Association and the Tahoe City Downtown Association. Our contracts with these business associations focus on locally implementing the nationwide Main Street program, which focuses on economic vitality, community design, promoting their downtown commercial districts of Kings Beach and Tahoe City, and community leadership. Their organization's passions for our North Lake Tahoe communities is evident in their work. They sponsor popular events in the community, including the fireworks on the 3rd and 4th of July, 2 summer concert series on our beaches, and shoulder season events to attract visitors in the fall and spring. Additionally, their economic vitality and business advocacy committees work closely with local businesses and the county to improve our downtown commercial cores. So now I will hand it off to Alyssa Riley of the North Tahoe Business Association, followed by Kylie Bigelow of the Tahoe City Downtown Association, to share their organization's goals and accomplishments from the past year.
Thank you, Emily. Honorable members of the board, my name is Alyssa Riley, and I am the Executive Director for NTBA. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with information about the North Tahoe Business Association, including recent happenings and what we have planned for the year ahead. NTBA is a nonprofit, member-based organization founded in 1979. Our mission is to improve economic vitality and the quality of life in the communities of North Lake Tahoe. Our purpose is twofold. One, to provide businesses with communications, marketing, resources, networking, and training, and to market NTBA's district as a vibrant and unique sense of place. We serve Carnelian Bay, Tahoe Vista, and Kings Beach, which is our main commercial corridor, and NTBA's district also crosses state lines and counties into Crystal Bay. NTBA has been partnering with Placer County to successfully implement the Main Street approach since 2004. The Main Street approach we have adopted focuses on 4 main areas, including economic vitality, events, promotions, marketing, community design, and admin organizational capacity. We effectively leverage your annual investment with the support of hundreds of volunteers, thousands of volunteer hours, tens of thousands of dollars raised from external sources, including sponsorships, strategic partnerships, and private donations through increased organizational capacity. At the core of NTBA are our members. We are proud that our membership has grown 40% since 2010. We ended 2019 with 217 members, and currently we have 219 members, showing our membership base is strong. We have seen our membership recently grow from out of our district, including Reno, South Lake Tahoe, Carson City, Gardnerville, and Incline Village. And now a few highlights and accomplishments. NTBA is well known and loved for the many community events we produce. Events are one of the main ways we market our district as they build awareness and drive visitation to NTBA's district and our business members. Each year, the complexity and resources required to produce events increases. Despite this, our events continue to receive generous support, which is an important revenue source, and events create lasting memories for our area visitors. Our event attendance and gross revenues have continued to grow annually. And now I will move on to our community design focus area, which relates to our town's aesthetics and cleanliness. We put a lot of energy and focus into this area. NTBA was awarded a Tourism Master Plan grant in 2018. The grant provided matching dollars for a year-round roof-line LED lighting program in Kings Beach. The goal of the program is to provide consistent lighting and make the downtown area more welcoming at night. We are currently working on phase 2 of the grant and hoping to get more buildings in the community involved this spring. 27 buildings opted in during phase 1. NTBA has a very passionate and active design committee. Our committee's goals for 2020 include trash regulations and overall cleanliness, the blight within our community, including chain link fences and unmanaged properties, and more public art projects, including sculptures and murals. In September, we ran an extensive community survey with large portions pertaining to community design. We had 85% of people respond that they want to see more public art within Kings Beach. After the community outreach in regards to art, NTBA applied for a Tourism Master Plan grant for a mural art project in Kings Beach, which consists of murals in the ADA ramp areas. We have received overwhelming support from the business owners and community as it pertains to this project. We have partnered with Arts for Schools and our local students to include them in this project as well. Kings Beach is excited for the opportunity to become the art district of the basin. From our survey results, 70% of the community stated that trash is a problem in our community, and 72% stated they would like to see more regulation and increased trash ordinances. Another 75% of people stated that bare boxes or animal-proof and approved bins should be required for residential units throughout our district. Through continued NTBA outreach effort, 36 of the 56 Main Street Kings Beach business property owners opted into our new Main Street litter-free program, which means they have agreed to pick up trash in front of and around their buildings at least once per week. We will soon be working to recruit the remaining 20 businesses and property owners to get them involved in the program. I'm ahead. There we go. By listening to our community, NTBA has decided to add a second cleanup day event for 2020, with our first in May and our second in September, in order to mitigate the trash found throughout our community during our busy summer season. Now, switching to our economic vitality focus area. As referenced before, our community survey consisted of 17 questions as it related to design, economic vitality, and overall goals for the community. We had an overwhelming response related to business growth, retention, and expansion in the Kings Beach downtown area. Kings Beach currently has 40 open parcels within our short 1-mile commercial corridor. We lost 6 businesses in the past 12 months, but successfully opened 1 new business in the last 30 days. We continue to be anxious for the Kings Beach Center to develop into viable businesses and lodging, and we are fully engaged in and disseminating information about this project and other catalyst projects on the horizon. We plan to continue to work with your staff to develop and assist with a grassroots economic development strategy for our district built specifically to help with business expansion, retention, and regulatory requirements. Transportation research, solutions, and parking management opportunities, affordable and workforce housing projects, initiatives, and support for the local management of our benefit assessment district. As a dynamic organization, we forever evolve and expand our services and scope to benefit Placer County, our members, and the community. For the remainder of this year and into 2021, in addition to supporting small businesses, marketing our district throughout an optimized website and our strategic communication and tools, and all of NTBA's Main Street efforts, we plan to create and execute our next strategic plan, continue our ongoing efforts to better the local economy from business growth to the overall aesthetics and design, and we will continue our ongoing collaborative work with co-production of the North Lake Tahoe Truckee Leadership Program and participation on the Business Association and Chamber Collaborative and in Tourism Marketing Committee, including exploring our opportunities for increased efficiency, reduced redundancy, and increased collaboration within our organization, Tahoe City Downtown Association, the North Lake Tahoe Chamber, and the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. In conclusion, on behalf of the NTBA Board of Directors and staff and the communities we serve, thank you for your board's ongoing support and of the North Tahoe Business Association and our mission to improve economic vitality and quality of life in North Lake Tahoe. Together, we are making a positive difference, and now I'm happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
I just had a quick comment to say thank you for a great job. You've been an incredible resource to the community, both with Joy in the back and you now, Alyssa, as far as helping us work with our business community to address some of the key issues. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And who's up next?
Good morning, Chair Gore, distinguished members of the board. My name is Kylie Bigelow, Executive Director of the, I'm going to put this up so I don't hunch down the whole time, Executive Director of the Tahoe City Downtown Association. This is my second time coming up to present to you guys, so I'm excited to share some updates, what's happened in this past year, and then what we're looking forward to for this year coming up. So to start, the mission of the Tahoe City Downtown Association, we are dedicated to the promotion and enhancement of Tahoe City community through innovation, leadership, advocacy, and events. We serve as a local voice to maintain a vibrant and prosperous place to live, work, play, and visit. We want to make Tahoe City America's best mountain town. We have 11 board of directors. Most of our board of directors own a small business in Tahoe City, so they're firsthand knowing what's going on in the business community. We have a new president this year. Rob Olson is our president. He owns Land to Living, an architecture firm. And then our VP is Abigail Gallup. She owns a graphic design company. Placer County, we get $85,000 a year through a contract with your board. And our goals, we have three main objectives. TCDA serves as a catalyst for economic and community vitality. We do this through beautification projects and encouraging new business and supporting existing business. We lead efforts regarding events, promotions, and marketing, attracting visitors and residents to the Tahoe City downtown to experience and support the community. And lastly, staying involved in community issues. So participating and providing feedback in community issues and engaging on relevant local issues impacting economic and social well-being. So up here we have a graphic of TCDA 2019 in review. Summary of what we've been have going on. So we did 25 events this year, some of those being a series. We utilized 119 volunteers. We have nearly 32,000 followers, so that's on all of our social media combined. We use that as a resource for our businesses and our community to highlight how Tahoe City is beautiful, a great place to visit. It's a big following for our small town, so we're happy to use that resource. Lighting, so downtown lighting in Tahoe City, we used nearly 14,000 feet of light, and flowers, so we put up 60 flower baskets this year. We have 212 members, and 19 of those members being new this year. Finally, down there we have our financial snapshot of the year. So we have a budget of $380,000. Our main income and revenue is from first sponsorship, so working with local businesses and corporations to get sponsorships, event revenue, and then lastly, contracted funds, which is the funds from Placer County. So those three things combined help us be sustainable. The TCDA, we have a committee called the Business Advocacy Committee. Members of this committee consist of TCDA board members, TCDA members, a staff of NLTRA, and Placer County staff. We decided as a committee, while there was a lot of projects we wanted to work on, we took a step back and decided, let's talk to the businesses first. So this is I know it's very small, but maybe you can see it in front of you. This is our business survey. We're doing it as business walk style, so one-on-one, face-to-face with our businesses. And our goal is to talk to 50 businesses in town. We're currently doing this, so I don't have my final data yet, but some things that are coming up include, housing shortage, traffic, transportation, and parking as an issue in Tahoe City, and the need for more lodging downtown. So these are the things that we thought they might say, and they are saying. So I'm happy to share the full results when those are complete. Downtown lighting. So this program has been active for about 10 years. This year, we made a big move towards sustainability. So we were able to work with Liberty Utilities and access a very generous rebate to upgrade from incandescent to LED. So right now we have full LED in all of downtown, and we had this similar budget. So we're very excited to upgrade to LEDs. Similar to King's Beach, we want to create a warm feeling in downtown to remind our visitors that we're vibrant all year long, and to keep walking downtown when it's dark at 5 o'clock in the winter. So the replacement of these LEDs save 25% or use 25% less energy. The Tahoe City Food and Wine Classic, it's one of our big events here in Tahoe City, and we had a big success last year. So we had 1,000 attendees, and we were able to increase revenue by 50%. So it's very exciting. And this event, each year it's been selling out 2 weeks in advance. So get your tickets, or I can get you some tickets if you guys want to come. And last year we did get support from the president of the Placer County Wine and Grape Association, and I've reached out to her again, as well as the Placer County Vintners Association. We'd love to see more local wineries involved, and I know they're doing a big push to get more marketing out there, so we'd love to support each other. This year in 2020, We have a new VIP ticket. We'll be hosting a pavilion down on Commons Beach. Those tickets are already sold out, but we still have about half of our general admission tickets left. The event will be June 20th, 2020 this year. 4th of July. So 4th of July is a huge event. Last year was our 74th anniversary. This year is our 75th. So it's a huge deal, a huge anniversary for our fireworks show. TCDA has been working closely with our partners in TBA, Placer County, and North Tahoe Fire to make sure that we can see the fireworks this year. So I want to thank Placer County for their leadership, and you'll hear more about that later. Community involvement. So our board, they love to be involved in everything that's going on in Tahoe City, everything that's touching Tahoe City. We want to be at the table. And we've been at the table and able to share out community issues, community projects with our members. We want to make sure that we're in the know, so when somebody calls us and asks us what's happening about any of these projects, we have an answer for them. So we're proud to be partnering with you guys on all of these projects listed here. Future of Tahoe City Downtown Association. So this year, we will continue to produce premier events in Tahoe City, empower the Business Advocacy Committee to take on projects to improve economic vitality in Tahoe City, inform and engage members on projects in town, and continue to collaborate with our community partners. We serve as a local voice to make Tahoe City a vibrant, prosperous place to live, work, play, and visit, and we hope to continue doing that this year and many years to come. So I want to thank your board for support for this many years, and want to ask if you guys have any questions.
Great, thank you. Supervisor Gustafson?
I don't have any questions. Again, Kylie and Alyssa, thank you so much for your leadership and partnership. You know, we have a couple other items on today's agenda that are key to some of the efforts we've been working on together with the fireworks, housing, and the BAE study, which I think will be really interesting. So thank you for all the efforts to try to revitalize our town centers, and some of the struggles that we're having, I think, are documented in the BAE report, and we can talk as we move forward about efforts in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and did you want to wrap it up, Emily?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we're really appreciative of their partnerships, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Any other questions from board members? And I can go ahead and open this up to the public if there's any comment from the public. All right. Thank you very much for the update. We appreciate it. Perfect. We're moving on to our 9:55 timed item, which is the Mountain Housing Council. And Supervisor Gustafson?
Yes, I need to recuse on this issue and leave. My husband is on the board of TTCF, and while I serve on the Mountain Housing Council as your representative, because you're allocating funds to the to TTCF through this potential action today, I need to recuse, so I'll be leaving.
All right. Thank you very much. And take it away, Jennifer Merchant.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board, County Executive Officer, and Council. Good morning. Thank you very much for having us here today. I wanted to start out briefly and just remind you that you will be receiving a presentation from Community Foundation CEO Stacy Caldwell with a bit of information and their request for funding for the next 3 years. I will follow her with some more detailed request for feedback from the board. So that's how we're going to roll. I did want to also remind the board that we are now in April going to be culminating our 3-year partnership to accelerate housing solutions through our partnership with the Mountain Housing Council. This was actually the first project implemented under your board's housing work plan. So we are proud that we've gotten this far with our community. And the Mountain Housing Council is a project of the Community Foundation. It does expire in April, and the Community Foundation proposal for the next 3 years is what Stacy will be presenting on today. So I will invite Stacy up to the podium to take that on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors, thanks for having me, staff, council. Appreciate being here.
It's strange to think that it's 3 years ago that I was here presenting the housing needs assessment that came together at a regional level. It's the first time that our North Lake Tahoe region really took on an issue as a collective and said, we're one ecosystem. We share the same employees, we share the same patients, students, and so the Community Foundation's charter is California, North Lake Tahoe. So we go down to West Shore and kind of dip into El Dorado County a little bit to the Nevada state line and up to Truckee and kind of everything in between. It's the same as the school district and the airport district and somewhat of the hospital district. And back in 2016, there was almost a mandate from our community to really look at housing as a challenge. The Community Foundation focuses on a lot of different aspects of a thriving, healthy community. In fact, our mission is to connect people and opportunities to generate more resources for a more caring, effective, and creative community. And so that plays out in a lot of different ways, traditionally through grant making and scholarships, but more recently through our strategic plan to pay attention to not only family strengthening, making sure that there's a healthy, vital community here, but also housing, and also more recently, the forest. So housing is what I'm here to talk to you about today. Since that strategic plan, the Community Foundation has not only been engaged in Mountain Housing Council, which we're going to recap and talk about the future of that, but we've also played in a couple other different arenas around housing, from helping catalyze a private business focused on unlocking second homes, to also helping structure soft financing in order for an affordable housing project to secure their state tax credits. So while you're looking at the Mountain Housing Council today, I want to underscore that the Community Foundation is committed to accelerating housing for our locals in whatever manifestation we feel like we can be relevant and is mission appropriate. So with that, let's get started. So yes, it's a 3-year initiative. We are so grateful for your partnership and support over these 3 years. Not only your funding, but more importantly, your staff representation and alignment with your work plan and the solutions that are coming forward, from policy explorations to community dialogues. Placer County has been front and center with Mountain Housing Council as a partner. And you might recall when we began this journey, one of our challenges in this region, which you know all too well, is the complexity of our government and jurisdictional institutions. And so with 3 counties and TRPA and then nearly 17 special districts, to align one systemic approaching solution for anything as complex as housing was really our challenge at the Community Foundation. We were able to pull together 28 partners, plus the Community Foundation, to sit together and really explore how to best accelerate those housing solutions. You can see that we had both community partners and funding partners. Those community partners were identified because of their ability to pull together large groups of constituents or stakeholders. So you have Contractors Association, Board of Supervisors, you have the chambers and the business associations, as well as some of our larger employers, and then of course some of our nonprofit community members who often we're writing a grant to, so we don't expect them to pay. And then we were able to secure funding through many of our public agencies, and including a couple of our larger employers. And our first order of business was to really define what kind of housing we were talking about. While we recognize that affordable is that is subsidized and targeting our lowest earning families, we recognize through that needs assessment that it was a much broader need in our region to actually get to that missing middle class. And we've learned so much in the process on how challenging that missing middle class housing product is to really manifest. But we embrace the entire spectrum, from the low wage all the way up to 195 area median income. Our first meeting 3 years ago was to really set goals of how we would achieve or identify success. And so this is what the council came together and said, this is what we want to pay attention to. Hopefully over the years, twice a year of you have seen a report from my office that captures not only those dashboards that we provide every quarter, but also all of the good work that our partners have done. So from monitoring and manifesting new housing units to attracting grants and tax credits to the table. We've also really explored some of the tougher policy conversations that have needed to happen in our region. It's not so that we can tell our jurisdictions how to go about the policy, but to inform ourselves as a collective and as a community, grounding ourselves in really the facts. And making sure that you and our other policymakers have access to the right information that our community has pulled together to help you make those decisions. One of the unintended benefits that has happened, and it has been fairly exciting over the years, is the way that the partners have come together outside of the Mountain Housing Council context. So exploring other collaborations among themselves. And this is a benefit that I think the Community Foundation is familiar with in other initiatives of ours, is when you keep bringing people together, putting the goal in front of them, holding ourselves mutually accountable to those goals, relationships start to deepen and strengthen. And those relationships are really allowing for some really good housing work to take place. So what does 2.0 look like? Well, we began asking our partners about that early summer this last year, recognizing that this was going to be an important transition from the 3 years. The Community Foundation never wanted to impose or assume that this was the next thing, and we ended up hiring a consultant that did a report for us on the next entity. We walked that report through not only the formal Mountain Housing Council meetings with all of the partners, but then we hosted a number of stakeholder meetings throughout the summer with different groups of the council to get their feedback. And in September this last year, we presented 3 different scenarios of which the council charged us to then go and explore what I'm presenting to you today. And so one of the things we learned in this exploration of what's next is the regional approach continues to be important. This built a muscle within our region that is informing so much more than housing, that convening our stakeholders is critical, that we have to continue to identify and attract new funding sources to the region, both sustainable and project-based. We need broader community education, and continuation of the Mountain Housing Council at this time was recommended. And so the work plan of 1.0 feels very familiar. So it would be continued capacity of what we're already doing, which is the regional facilitation, convening, reporting, communicating to the community through public outreach, not only gatherings, but also our social media presence, digital content. Statewide policy coordination. This is one of those things that you guys got fired up about when we were voting to be on 1.0, which is this collective has no less than 7 paid lobbyists. And if we can show up to the state coordinated around housing, we probably have a better chance to influence not only policy, but funding. And so that has been a real pleasure to focus at the statewide level on housing. And then, of course, to support the different working groups, tiger teams, collaborations among the partners. But what we've learned also needs to inform where we're heading. And so to take a moment and kind of explain how we got there, I just want to acknowledge 3 different challenges that we have faced in the last, I would say, year in particular, because the Housing Council took a while to get going, get everybody connected. And as projects come to the region, we recognize that successful projects have 3 things. They have their entitlements, and they've passed all of their planning. They have funds to build, and they have community buy-in. So if you flip it, the unsuccessful projects have some kind of combination of those, but not all three. We see projects that have entitlements but not community buy-in or funding. We see projects that have funding but haven't gone through that entitlement and planning process and don't have community buy-in. And so to solve for that, what we're proposing has elements to address each one of those. So on the community buy-in, we have identified, the process and the order of those processes sometimes take too long. The community isn't engaged in the right times, and it's sometimes perceived as not the right fit for the neighborhood because there's not a readiness among our community members. Two is this is what developers call the entitlement spin cycle. They don't have a clear path. It's an unknown fee structure, and it's just not streamlined. And three, we have one-off funding mechanisms. So there are pools of funds within the region, and developers find themselves having to go and basically pitch looking for those funds. And from the funder's point of view, you don't know if they really pass the sniff test of our vision of this region. And so how do you do the due diligence around the development itself and the developers and the right fit to drive these bigger community and regional areas? And so what we're proposing here is a three-part solution, of which two of those are online, ready to go with what we're proposing in 2.0, and one of them is a future thought. First step is Regional Housing Action Plan, and this is to really get a technical document in front of us, not just goals set that we're going to accomplish together, but a technical document the region buys into that comes out of the Mountain Housing Council and has that community buy-in. The second piece is this alignment of our housing funds. So we're calling it the Housing Accelerator, but the idea is to convene those fund decision makers twice a year in order to hear different developments that fit in an alignment with this regional action plan. And finally, as an implementation arm, which is kind of the unknown right now, because we recognize that it needs to be in place, but right now they don't have a work plan and they don't have funds aligned. And so we're just cautioning us not to launch something before we're ready. So what we're asking today is that we move forward with 2.0 with those 4 areas that you know is Mountain Housing Council, add a regional action plan, add funding coordination, and then a to be determined is the housing hub, which is the implementation. We feel like that is going to not only require more funding to launch it and incubate it, we plan to, if this is what the regional action plan dictates, go out to an RFP to incubate it, either an existing nonprofit with a different governance, or perhaps the private sector will step up. So that's all to be determined in the next year as we work through this regional action plan. So that's all what we talked about here. Governance continuing under Truckee Tahoe, or Truckee Community Foundation. And the budget is presented in your packet. And what you'll see is we have asked our non-funding partners to consider playing a role in funding, of which we're seeing some progress there. And we're asking our existing funding partners to consider coming to the table with the same amount plus 10% to pay for that regional action plan that first year. So what we're asking for you, and part of this collaborative agreement, is your entire organization's commitment to furthering the work of accelerating housing solutions, assigning top leadership to sit on the council, your top executive and your top elected. Consider recommendations of policy, land use, and programs that come from Mountain Housing Council, because if ideas and recommendations are coming out of the council and they get stalled out at our policymakers' agenda, then we really won't have that systemic change. Funding that makes sense for your agency. Each agency has to make that decision based on their responsibilities for housing, but also just their mission alignment. And then access to additional resources, for example, like your lobbyists, or supporting us in due diligence around projects, things like that. There is a community ask as we continue to grow into this next phase. The community's involvement, engagement is very important.
And then, of course, seeking additional funds because we will have a gap related to that implementation piece. We have presented this same ask to all of our partners. I'm aware that our jurisdictions have asked for a more detailed work plan, which I have seen some of the ideas, and they fit absolutely in line with what we have done already for 1.0. Partners are currently out agendizing this for their own organizations. We've asked for their partner agreements and commitments by March 15th. Some of them have asked for a little bit of leeway. Of course, we'll do that. So with that, I will answer any questions, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Euler.
Well, thank you for your report, and it's nice that we have some success and we're moving some things forward. Some questions on the budget, and I don't know if you want to jump back to that slide. If you could please provide a little bit of explanation. So since we see the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation carved out under the administrative fee of the 10%, is project management, that's the Mountain Housing Council? Or who's project manager in that regard?
The Community Foundation has a fairly streamlined staff of 5 FTE.
Right.
And what we have done is blend it. So at the time when we've had a communications person at TTCF, we allocated time in communications. Most of those are contract, but from time to time when our own staff, including my time, goes towards this work, we allocate it to that funding stream.
Okay. And then help me understand what you mean by facilitation and the $70,000 a year that's assigned to facilitation.
So the vast majority of this work is convening meetings with not only the regional, the quarterly council meetings, which is a lot of work to pull together, but then the Tiger teams themselves often are multiple meetings throughout the month, kind of furthering the conversation, working on the policy papers that you have seen, as well as community meetings. So showing up to community meetings and supporting that work.
And that is then a cost beyond the project management and the administrative fee, is that facilitation fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where we get into the larger numbers in year 2 and 3, when you talk about the hub pilot project?
Yes. So you'll see that I've allocated what I think is a reasonable amount to launch a new program under an existing nonprofit or a potential private partner. Yeah, it's, we have a couple of other initiatives at the Community Foundation, so I can see the business model behind those numbers. And if you look at any small nonprofit organization, I thought it was interesting to see our business associations here present their budgets to you. Mountain Housing Council is like a small nonprofit organization. It requires, a small team that can pull together a lot of work, and I hope you've been able to see that work product. But it is very much in line with some of these other initiatives that we work with.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? I do have a couple questions. So you mentioned that other partners have asked for a more detailed work plan, right? So
yes.
Do you anticipate that our staff will have an opportunity to have a copy of that as well, I think?
I think the staff has it. It was actually given to me, and I'll just acknowledge deliverables like the website, a monthly newsletter, a bulletin, press releases, which are things we do, creating agendas, taking summary notes. So those are the kinds of things that were requested, and I think give to Supervisor Euler's, like, what's in this,
right,
a level of detail that kind of supports the work. And again, the other thing I'm always conscious of is this is a collective of 28 other partners who really set the goals, which then creates the work plan and the operational model, which is why we need a 3-year commitment. The Community Foundation is willing to continue to operationalize this work, but again, with such a streamlined organization already, anything that we take on, we have to then either hire internally or externally. And so we want to be able to not only make the commitment from an operational standpoint, but also not be on this fundraising circuit every year. And so that's kind of why we did that. And I want to just reiterate on the hub costs. I really believe that that has to be grounded in the regional housing action plan. So that would be premature to launch right now, because not only do we have to let form follow function in this, but then we don't want to launch a new entity that doesn't have a work plan that's tied to the bigger regional buy-in.
Great, thank you. And as far as the budget, so the Community Foundation puts together the budget.
Yes.
And then your board reviews that and your board approves it, correct?
Yes, and this April we'll have kind of the close to final review from our finance committee that then will go to our board.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing I would like to see is just to make sure that the partners are aware of what's going on, so we're not duplicating efforts.
100%.
Right? So that we're
Yes.
utilizing our resources as efficiently as we can. And if one partner is doing one thing, then we're not duplicating those efforts.
That is so much of the coordination and almost the messiness of collaborative work, is making sure that you're in close contact and alignment of each other's efforts.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? No, all right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Stacy.
Thank you.
So I was going to move on to the next portion that kind of talks a little bit more about that detail that the staff had prepared along with the other jurisdictions. I think I can go forward to.
Thank you.
I think it's getting to some of the questions that you and Kirk had potentially. So we did have some local government conversations following the proposal by the Community Foundation, and that included Nevada County, Placer County, and the town of Truckee. The county convened those discussions with the two other local jurisdictions. The purpose was really to provide feedback on the Community Foundation proposal. And we really see that our more detailed request leverages the strengths of the Community Foundation and the Mountain Housing Council more multi-organizational power, and drives that implementation of the programs and projects that increase that permanent resident workforce, which is really the goal of the organization. So some of the themes from our conversation you'll see are very similar to what you heard proposed by Stacy, but asking for a little bit more detail on that. So really transitioning from this awareness or working together partnership to implementation of housing, and acknowledging that through the work plan of the Mountain Housing Council, ensuring that it's complementary to the Community Foundation proposal, and then really identifying specific areas of work so that we can then get a little bit more granular on what the details of the budget are related to that. So we move on to the first thing. There are 6 total ideas that we shared with Stacy, and Jeff Lux, actually the town manager from the town of Truckee, shared that information that was prepared by the 3 organizations. So really continuing what the Mountain Housing Council, we think, does best. It's really a strength of the organization, and that's brought to us from the Community Foundation. The regional partners being convened on a regular basis and continuing that dialogue is really important to the success of the organization and the partnership. So doing that so that we can measure progress, look at our goals, address policy options, and understand what different organizations might want to be doing, and apply those to our challenges that are collectively very similar, but in a more detail. When you look at the more detail, a little, you see some nuances in different communities. So looking at those sub-regional collaborations as well. And then an area that is not new, but we believe certainly aligned with what the Community Foundation has proposed, is coordinating the regional efforts, amplifying the benefits by linking those efforts and keeping the partners aligned with those common goals. And some of the deliverables that we think would be important as part of that effort is overseeing the Regional Housing Action Plan. So there is alignment there, project coordination, and project oversight, and then the communications piece of that. So the 2 times a year funder reports that your board gets, as well as the placemat document and the dashboard of how far, what kind of progress we're making. So we believe there is alignment there. And then communications and marketing, again, that is an area that they have been doing in the past and are proposing to continue to do. And we think that, as Stacy mentioned, some of the more specific deliverables that could be mentioned include the website, the e-news, the monthly communications, whether it's through the bulletin, notice of public meetings, and then their interactions with the press. And then on policy research and projects, this is similar to what's been done before, looking at the key topics and really raising the awareness of the understanding on behalf of the community of those things, and then accepting feedback from the local jurisdictions and providing policy options for consideration by elected bodies such as ours. Examples of some of those things, we really think that focusing probably at 1 or 2 per year, depending on the work effort related to that, but certainly the Regional Housing Action Plan for this coming year, and then looking at the deed restriction programs. As you heard from Vail, Colorado, in the presentation from George Ruther last year, we're working on that. The town of Truckee is interested in it, and when we can get the power of the Mountain Housing Council behind that and really convening those conversations, by the time we get it to your board, we've got a really good portfolio of community feedback. So we think that's a great role that they can play on our behalf and the community's behalf. Legislative and other advocacy, certainly an area she mentioned with all of the different power of the advocacy at the statewide level. And then a new thing that we think could be considered is incubating and assisting with the launch of a separate local advocacy organization or program. Maybe it's undertaken by an existing nonprofit, or maybe it's a group of nonprofits getting together to advocate not only at the state level, but also at the local level, whether it's for policies or ideas or projects. So we wouldn't be engaged in saying what projects they should be supporting. We wouldn't want to do that. That would be a conflict, in fact, I think. But we would want to be helping other nonprofits play that role in our community. And then finally, another new thing that we think is very aligned with what the Mountain Housing Council proposal is, but a little bit more detail on that, is really attracting that stable and diverse capital funding sources so that we can get to the missing middle especially. That's the piece where there is no state and federal funding. So if we want to push that, the people who are living in our communities but can't afford to live here, people who are working for the county or for other organizations and have a challenge buying into the community. And we've got a list of sample work areas there that we would like your board to consider. So the action requested from your staff today is to take action on the preferred Mountain Housing Council scope of work, and we're requesting a commitment from your board of $55,000 per year for up to the 3-year period recommended by the Community Foundation, totaling a $165,000 net county cost. And happy to answer any questions or take notes on your direction.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions, comments from board members? Okay, we'll open this up to the public. Any comments from the public? All right, we'll close public comment. And any discussion? What's the will of our board? If we gave some feedback on some things that were of concern to us, but beyond that, we have a request for funding. Motion from Mueller and second from Supervisor Holmes. Roll call or no? No? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries.
All right. Thank you very much for your feedback.
Keep
Greatly
up the great
appreciate
work.
it. Thanks.
Look at that, just on time. So we will move to our 10:25 timed item, which is the update on the county housing program. And if somebody could let Supervisor Gustafson know that she can come back in the room, that would be great. Thank you. Give it just a moment, Shauna.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good morning, Shauna Purvines, Community Development Resources Agency, and it's going to be quite the housing morning. So I am here today to present an update on the mid-year housing work plan on behalf of the county's multi-departmental housing unit team. This team was created through the CEO's office just roughly 3 years ago now, and this is just a report on where we're at today. So many plans, many directions, one housing strategy. I wanted to be able to provide you with a little bit of a framework of how the housing team works. We know that there are a number of plans out there, being regional housing plans, local plans, general plans, community plans, strategic or specific plans. Our idea was to not yet create another plan, another arrow or direction, but to identify and create a housing strategy that could support each of those plans, making their housing components more successful. And the way we did that was to support a diversity of housing choices. We've been very good at building single-family homes and to some degree multifamily homes. But over the years, some of the more specialized housing, smaller housing, we talked about missing middle housing, have gotten lost for a number of reasons. So the program is to really look to where we can create and support that diversity of housing choices. One of the ways we wanted to do that was to create the biggest toolbox we could with as many tools as we could in it, because you never know what tool you're going to need to fix that problem. The first thing we did is we looked at our own policies and plans to figure out if our goals were aligned, if our objectives and our implementation was in the right direction. And then went into regulatory relief. What we wanted to learn was, are we doing things that are just getting in our own way of our goal? So we've identified those. Later this year, we will be bringing forward to you a package of code amendments that will help streamline the housing projects that are coming through the county. And then we've also looked for ways where we could just speed up that process as well, not so much as it's regulatory, but just time through our application system. We're also looking for ways to preserve and protect our existing housing options, and then looking for those local funding strategies, one of them that we just talked a little bit about with the Mountain Housing Council's presentation. So this year, I think what we're most excited about is we spent the first couple of years, about 18 months to 2 years, really in the planning phase, really doing a lot of studying and analysis on our existing conditions and our existing plans and goals. And this year, we're really turning into the implementation phase and very much looking forward to that. We really want to get to construction and to the development side. We also wanted to make sure that we're implementing what we were calling high-impact focused outcomes, ones that are deliberate actions that will yield the greatest results. So just a quick reminder on some of the things that really kicked us off and created our foundation. It was the establishment through the CEO's office of that multi-departmental housing unit team. A reminder who sits on that. That is our facilities, our capital improvement, our real estate services, of course, the CEO's office, CEDRA, Public Works, and economic development. So it's been a really great team to work with over the last couple of years, and we look forward to what's ahead. We've also done board approval of the housing work plan, which I'm here providing the update today. Many housing studies, many housing surveys, where we've actually had anywhere from 500 people to nearly 3,000 people respond to, which really provided us that understanding of what people's needs are or what their wants are as we move forward with different housing choices. We had the 3-year funding, the initial 3-year funding for the Tahoe Truckee Foundation for the Mountain Housing Council. Thank you for supporting them going on for the next 3 years. I think they're a good group that we've enjoyed working with, and there's still really great things to come from that. We've also completed the housing strategy and development plan. We identified 100 sites that are what we're calling the housing opportunity sites. These are sites that particularly meet state and local funding thresholds if they were to be developed. So they're ones that we're wanting to focus in on. And then, of course, our affordable housing investment and loan portfolio. Currently, the county's total investment and loan portfolio is little over $33 million. About $22 million of that is in 96 loans. That's supporting about 300 units out there today. And then more recently, with the board's investment in both DeWitt Center with Mercy Housing's project, and the purchase of the Nahas property. We definitely have a great loan portfolio, and we look forward to nurturing that and protecting it. So, to just a few things that are going on this past 6-9 months. We did have the purchase of that Nahas property for achievable housing. There has been about 6 public outreach meetings. I'm going to touch a little bit on this further into the presentation. We also sold the Sabre City County property, which is slated to develop 24 housing. About 6 of those will actually be for low income. We secured funding for the 79 units at Mercy Housing at the Government Center, secured the funding for 56 more affordable units here at Schaefer's Mill, completed the housing finance and investment strategy, and established the Western Housing Stakeholder Group. We also supported the establishment of the Housing Trust, which did file at the end of the year. They have held their first board meeting, and we really do look forward to working with them. That is a creative way for private financing of housing to be able to be invested in our community. There was the approval of the Sunset Area Plan, along with Placer Ranch, which included a robust housing component to that. We received 20 additional HUD housing vouchers this past year, provided rental subsidies to 55 low-income families through our CalWorks program, collected full payment on all of our housing loans that matured in 2019, completed all of our required grant management and state housing reports, received a 2-year $825,000 Bringing Families Home grant, was awarded $500,000 for first-time home ownership program, and then an additional $310,000 through the SB2 planning funds that were as part of the SB2 recorder fee program. So just a few things that we're working on going forward. We are looking to convert our 1-year work plan to a 1- and 3-year work plan. There are many items that we work on that require multiple years. So being able to plan and our staffing and our resource for that, we think is going to be valuable for your board and for the public to understand. We're also going to be adding an annual report to that. That's different than the state annual report. It'll probably be glossier and easier to read. But we will be including that this coming year. We will be doing the 2001 through 2029 housing element update. We are in the process of working with TRPA on the Tahoe Basin Area Plan Code amendments to bring them consistent with state law. Also just to address some of the housing needs that we have in the area since adoption of that plan. Looking at local, regional, and private funding partnerships. The housing code update, which I mentioned earlier, that should be coming in later this fall. Developing an ADU resource center, e-services, and the housing opportunity sites I'm going to touch on more specifically here. And then projects that are underway or soon to be under construction. Mercy and Schaefer are slated to go under construction this summer. So that's nearly 140 units that hopefully will be under construction this summer. And then in planning and design, we do have the remaining portion of the Placer County Government Center mixed use, and then we're also looking at a co-housing site, or working with a co-housing partner for a site on the campus as well. And then the Dollar Creek Crossing, which is the project proposed for the Nahas property. And then working on the housing components for the Kings Beach Center and the Eastern Gateway properties here in Tahoe. So I'm going to touch on just a couple of the bigger items that we're working on. Accessory dwelling units. I've been out quite a bit lately providing presentations on this. I think most of us know there was substantial or sweeping changes to the law this past year. These are some of the bigger changes. No short-term rental uses are now allowed for accessory dwellings. No impact fees when they're less than 750 square feet. Side and rear setbacks went clear down to 4 feet. Cannot be barred from homeowners associations or through CC&Rs any longer. They added a 25% increase under multifamily projects, meaning if you had a 100-unit existing apartment project or unit, you could increase or add a 25 additional units to that under the accessory dwelling unit law. Ministerial review went to 60 days, reduced parking requirements. Actually, parking requirements were pretty reduced in the previous 2017 revisions to state law. The biggest change on this one was if you needed a parking space, a required parking space was what you were converting to the unit, say a garage, then you did not have to replace that parking space any longer. You now can have up to 2 ADUs per lot. So you can have your primary home, you can have a secondary, and you can have what's called a junior unit. The junior unit is required to be contained within the single family, so it still should only look as 2 structures, but it is 3 units per lot on all single family lots throughout the state of California are now allowed by right. There are no minimum lot size, no coverage restrictions, and you cannot restrict the affordability. Now, we can, through our program, if we wanted to further waive fees, and somebody wanted that, we could then restrict the affordability on those, but just as a normal person coming in for an application, there would be no affordability restrictions required. So what's to come this year for ADUs here in Placer County? We are establishing what we're calling the Second Unit Resource Center. We will have a dedicated staff to assist with that process. We have also, our counter staff have been fantastic, really getting up to speed and understanding the law and being able to answer questions for the public. We are preparing an inspirational book. This will have ideas and examples of what one might be able to construct. We'll look at versions that are contained within existing single-family homes or detached or above garages, just to give some ideas. We are looking to actually prepare pre-approved plans that we would be able to provide for free to people coming in for applications. They will all be under that 750 square feet will be the plans that we will have. We're looking at 3 to 4 different types of plans that people would be able to pull off the shelf. A how-to webpage and workbook. That webpage will also include a cost calculator for the construction of your unit, a fee calculator, and then also a return on investment calculator or rent calculator, so you could learn how fast you might be able to recoup your investment into that new unit. And then electronic plan submittals we actually already have available, but it'll also be included as part of the package. We've been invited to the Auburn Home Show for 2020. We'll be attending that along with other ADU and tiny home contractors and providers and then lenders, and look forward to talking about what Placer County will have to offer. We will be to you probably later this year, May, June, with an update to the county's ordinance. At this time, we are defaulting to the state ordinance because our ordinance is inconsistent, as is every jurisdiction in the state of California based on the changes that were made. And therefore, per the state law, if any portion of a local ordinance is inconsistent with the state law, the entire ordinance is found null and void. So we will be bringing our updated ordinance here. We're estimating June for it to be here at the board. We're also working with financiers and lenders to assist with developing ADUs for our homeowners and then also contractors so that we will have resource lists for people who are interested. E-services or Ask Placer. This is a great tool right now in our current situation with our pandemic of coronavirus. We now have the ability for anybody to do business with us 24/7 without having to come to the county. So it's been launched now for about 10 months. We have 3 different portals: residential, business, and commercial. And zoning. To date, we've had about 9,000 questions that have been answered through our system. We have estimated about 2,000 hours have been saved based on phone calls having to be returned or just time at the counter. And then we have approximately 7,000 interactions with what we call Ask Placer. That's our chatbot or our artificial or AI, artificial intelligence. This one, we are now up to about 300 questions and set a goal of about 500 questions before the end of the year that will be actually in our Ask Placer. And then we did just get notified yesterday. We received an additional award, a national award for our, so I think we're up to 4 now on that one. The Housing Opportunity Site, this is a tool we placed on our webpage. As I mentioned, we had 100 sites. We now have a site where you can go in and look at the parcels we've identified, click on those parcels and find out a little more information available should anybody be interested in developing those sites. And then, of course, contact information because we are here to help. On the Government Center, it was evident of the just what a good idea it was to do all the pre-planning and approval last year. We're calling it the Christmas Miracle. As of at the end of last year, we did not believe that we were going to receive funding for Mercy Housing. We were pretty low down on that threshold list. There were 4 other projects above us that would have essentially been awarded first. But because of our readiness, because of our master plan, because of the environmental, because of the work that was done, they were able to actually award nearly $34 million to Mercy so that they were able to move on that project this year. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are working to look at roughly the other 400 housing that is been planned for that site, and then also the commercial and mixed-use area this year, working with a consultant to help market that and hopefully get that under development as well. It's this past year, West Placer, we have a number of specific plans down in that area. Of course, approving the new Placer Ranch. In total, we now have about 24,000 entitled units down there, which means we have roughly 2,400 affordable units that are planned for in that area. The 2 active ones now, Riola Vineyards and Placer Vineyards, we've been working with them to assist with meeting their affordable housing requirements. And since we're in Tahoe today, we figured we would take a moment just to focus in on a few of the Tahoe items that we were doing. And for that, I'm going to invite Emily Setzer up to brief you on those.
Thank you. As always, housing is an important topic in Tahoe, and we do have a lot going on here. We're working on code updates to facilitate housing countywide, but in Tahoe specifically, county staff have been working on Tahoe Basin Area Plan amendments that would allow multi-person, kind of that micro unit or dorm-style housing, wherever multifamily apartments are already allowed today. We would update the accessory dwelling unit code to be as compliant to state law, and we've been talking closely with TRPA staff about ADU code in the basin overall. And it would expand the affordable definition in our basin area plan to match TRPA's already adopted definition of achievable, which is about close to 200% of Placer County's area median income. For incentive programs, as Shauna mentioned, we're working on countywide efforts with the ADU Resource Center, but it will also include Tahoe-specific information for the basin guidelines. The town of Truckee has also approached county staff to discuss ways in which we can partner regionally to incentivize and facilitate construction of ADUs in our area. Last year, Vail's housing director presented the Vail and Deed program to your board, and now we are formulating a similar workforce housing deed restriction program that would incentivize homeowners to restrict their residential property to secure housing for people who live and work in the community. The program would provide financial assistance to the local workforce across the county, but in the basin or Eastern Placer, it would also help secure our existing housing stock for local residents, where more than 70% of the homes are owned by vacant second homeowners. The town of Truckee has also expressed interest in partnering with us on this initiative. For housing development and acquisition, your board purchased the 11-acre Nahas property 2 miles north of Tahoe City to provide achievable housing for the community, known as the Dollar Creek Crossing Project. We've had ongoing community outreach about potential options for that property, and Shauna will provide more detail in upcoming slides on that project. And as the Kings Beach Center and Eastern Gateway projects unfold, we're looking forward to planning 31 workforce housing units attached to those projects. And then also the county is actively searching for a property that meets the needs for permanent supportive housing for our community. And there's more. There are several funding options in the region to support housing right now and looking into the future. TOT and a Tourism Business Improvement District are potential funding sources. If the T-bid passes, it would redirect nearly $4 million of TOT to housing and transportation. The MARTIS Fund Down Payment Assistance Program also provides $500,000 in loans that are available for home buyers working in Placer County east of the Summit or in the town of Truckee and seeking to buy homes in those areas. And as you heard earlier, the Mountain Housing Council is envisioning its 2.0 version and has included a regional private housing trust in that proposal. For legislative advocacy, that is very important to our region. Staff contributes annually to our county's legislative platform by identifying legislative needs specific to Tahoe and Eastern Placer. And then this spring, county staff will again participate with Mountain Housing Council and Sierra Business Council partners in Sacramento to discuss our regional housing needs with state legislators, and specifically housing policy needs that are specific to our region. And now I'll pass it back to Shauna.
So to kind of cap off the Tahoe section, Dollar Creek Crossing, this is the Nahas property. The county purchased that. Thank you to your board at the end of last year. Prior to that, there were some community outreach meetings with our partners, Related Pacific, and then following this January, the county led a public outreach meeting. Going forward, as we are now have ownership of the site, the county will take the lead on developing a plan for the site. Myself through CEDRA, and then Paul Breckenridge with Capital Improvements will be the lead on that. Of course, with all of the support we've had and will continue to have through the CEO's office, capital facilities, public facilities, and resource services. And real estate services, good. I'm just having a hard time getting that out today. But we are looking forward. Those 6 meetings with the community definitely gave us a lot to think about, some really great ideas. And we are looking forward now to developing a plan for that site in partnership with Related Pacific, and being able to return back to the community with some options and ideas for moving that project forward. So, as was mentioned earlier, legislative advocacy is critically important. Just in 2019, there were over 200 housing laws that were proposed. At the close of that year, last October, the governor signed roughly about 45 new laws, which are keeping us very busy in reviewing and figuring out where we need to update or bring consistent our policies, goals, and practices to meet those state requirements. In addition, this year, just about 2 weeks ago, I think last count I was about 65 new housing laws were actually just introduced. We are just now getting ourselves through those and understanding those. Some of those may have an impact on us, and having that a legislative advocacy component to the multi-departmental team effort is critical. Also using our partnerships with through the Mountain Housing Council and those partners is going to be important for Placer County to ensure that those laws definitely support our goals and our objectives, and hopefully don't impede the good work that we're already doing. Also, this past couple of years, or particularly last year in 2019, we did see a substantial amount of funding allocated to housing and homelessness through the legislature. I would say right now we're having a little problem getting it out of the departments at the state level. It seems to be kind of hung up there, but it's soon to come. And so all of our efforts with our planning and our goal setting definitely will put us in a good position to be able to be competitive for that housing. And then last but not least, one of our largest work efforts this coming year will be the update to our housing element. Under state law, we are required to update this every 8 years, assuming that it is certified. Housing elements are the only element in a general plan required to go to the state and be found into conformance with state law. If it is not found into conformance with state law, it actually jeopardizes our county from being able to compete for funding, transportation funding, parks, recreation funding, and of course, housing funding. So we are required to have an adopted housing element next year by August of next year. So we'll be bringing that to your board probably around April, and then working with the state to make sure that it is consistent. It will set the goals for the next 8 years. So it will be our goals from 2021 through 2029. In these past couple of years, I think because it is the only element that is required to go to the state to find that conformance, many other things have been tagged on to a housing element requirement that will expand our housing element update this coming year. But we do look forward to getting into that and starting that community outreach as well. With that, I am concluded.
Thank you for the update, Shauna. I appreciate it. Let's start with questions. Supervisor Euler.
Yeah, several. Thank you. Very good presentation. I want to start by perhaps observing that I'm a little disappointed that our friend from the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation didn't stick around for this, because here we are talking about this and she got her money and left. So you might want to, I don't know, from my perspective anyway, pass on that it would have been nice to see her engagement in this conversation, since it has a lot to do with what we were just talking about. On slide 10, you were listing all the different changes that are allowed, and then you said up to 2 ADUs allowed per lot, but you clarified as to say that one of them had to be incorporated within the primary structure. What I'm wondering is that accomplished through an attached roof line or a common wall?
It's required to be contained within the single-family dwelling, so it can be contained within the second unit as well. It just is not a third detached unit on the site.
But what I'm saying
But
is,
yes,
if I have a common roof line, does that qualify, or does it have to be actually a common wall?
That is a question that I actually have posed to HCD's legal counsel. The way it is being interpreted is that it does need to be contained within the living space of the single-family unit. So it wouldn't be like a breezeway and then an attached. That would be considered the second.
Okay, so, but then, when you say contained within, so if I have a primary residence and I build an additional bedroom, bathroom with a common wall, does that,
that would,
does it have to have an internal door connecting, or can it be external? I'm just trying to figure out.
It can. So for a junior unit, again, this is the unit that's 500 square feet or less. It can have an internal access.
But doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to, and it can have an external. The difference with a secondary dwelling is that it's required to have external access and cannot have internal access unless it's through a garage. Okay. So yeah, the junior units are, the thought is conversion of additional living space or master bedrooms or those types of units inside of a larger home.
Okay, and then on slide 11, you spoke to the issue of having pre-approved plans. I love that, because obviously engineering's done, all that other stuff is done. And then you also reference on there preparing a local contractors list. What about blending the two of those essentially, and working with, not all folks who do prefab manufactured housing will sell in California, largely due to our Title 24 requirements and things along those lines. But what about working with those kinds of folks to create a list of whether it's pre-approved plans that are below 750 square feet that are exempt from these, where you have a list of homes that people could go online and actually look at the manufactured homes that have prices associated with that and say, we've already reviewed these, and you can plop them down and place your order today.
Absolutely. It's a great idea.
Thank you. Happens occasionally. When the coffee's good.
Supervisor Holmes. Supervisor Holmes.
Thank you. Shauna, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your leadership on this housing issue. We've really come a long way in the last 2 years, and I'm really excited about that. You mentioned in your presentation regarding the possibility of co-housing at the Placer County Government Center in North Auburn, and you and I and others went up and visited the one in Nevada City. I just want to point out that there'll be a program on KBIE Channel 6 later on this month, I can't remember the date, about the co-housing project. So I encourage anybody that's interested in that to take a look at it.
Great.
Thank you.
And I do believe we'll be to your board with that item to work in partnership with the developer that's looking at the co-housing on April, or in April.
Good, thank you.
Supervisor Gustafson.
I wanted to compliment you as well, and Emily, thank you, and for all the leadership on housing. Same thing, as you know, it's such a crisis, especially up here in Tahoe. Emily, I had a couple questions for you, and Shauna, I'll probably have a question for you too.
Sure.
You mentioned looking at housing, micro housing units, as I think especially for our J1s, because I think all my fellow supervisors know this, we rely so heavily on J1s, both in the winter and summer business.
Clarify what a J1 is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't actually describe it other than it's foreign employees that come here under a J1 visa and do a temporary housing. That's a different need than qualifies for anything else. And I think it's certainly of interest potentially to our business community through the TBID and TOT
Well, and I think
funding.
the J1 has the obligation of the employer having to actually play a role in providing the housing. They can't actually accept them in if they haven't identified the housing opportunity.
They have to identify that housing. So I'm really pleased to hear that, that we're working on that. And I hope we can get that out to our business community as we start talking about solutions that are as expedient as possible to address those issues. And certainly you've seen all the emails and complaints about some of the existing J1 housing and residential units and the issues that's been creating. That was just a comment. My question on the Kings Beach Center, and for you or for anyone else, I know there's a certain requirement in that agreement for 31 units, but that space appears to be large enough to do many more. And can we, okay, whoever I'm supposed to ask this to, I'd certainly encourage us to look at if he might have a requirement or they may have a requirement that we've agreed to, but can we expand that? Because it's such a great location.
So that was an initial estimate based on what they have proposed to date. So the formula that is used as part of the policy. So there's no contract, there's no agreement to that. That was just kind of the first blush estimate on what that requirement would be. So as far as looking at additional, I think that is kind of the interest of the developer was in picking up the Eastern Gateway, was to be able to both accommodate what his needs will ultimately end up being based on whatever final project he decides to build, in addition to what he can provide to the community and building on that site.
Great. Well, I'd love to see that expanded if possible through a partnership or whatever else we can do. And I just want to thank both of you. You always amaze me with your knowledge of everything that's changed in the last 60 days, 90 days in housing in our state. And I know there's a lot of available funding, so I just really hope we can materialize that into actually projects that can get done. Oh, co-housing. We're also I just wanted to tell the rest of the board, when we look at the co-housing, we also talked about it briefly as it related to the Nahas property, because there's been a real interest from the community on home ownership models that don't seem to necessarily work on that site, but potentially one element of that site could be some co-housing if it made sense here. So just wanted to make sure we shared that with the board.
Supervisor Euler, you have a question?
Yeah, would you mind explaining that, what the co-housing model looks like?
Sure. So co-housing, from kind of driving by, if you're at the street, it looks like probably any other development, housing development. It can be single-family detached. It can be smaller, low-density types apartments, or it can be high-rise apartments. Really, the uniqueness of co-housing is to how it's developed, and it is that those that are going to ultimately live in there come together first and design their neighborhood together, and then work through the construction component of it, and then ultimately end up either through leases or likely and most of the time home ownership inside of that project. So.
And there has been a group interested in doing one in Truckee, and so we thought potentially based on the interest in the government center, maybe there's interest if we made that site, part of that site available for that concept.
I've got a couple of questions, Shauna. With all the talk about tiny homes and how do we provide more housing at lower cost, so whether that's mobile home parks, tiny homes, RV parks, however that works, is there some work that y'all are doing around that? I know that having sewer and septic systems is an issue, but I would guess that you're going to have people interested in those types of products, so are you going to include those as we're doing some housing updates?
Absolutely. So the tiny homes is proposed under the housing code update, and that's one I mentioned will be coming here this fall. Okay. It's we are looking at tiny homes both as primary and as secondary units in the proposed amendments, and then an ordinance around those on how they can be used and what they need to look like. So generally the challenge with those or any type of non-permanent housing, but longer term than temporary housing, I guess. I think that's been the biggest struggle for tiny homes across the state is that they don't really fit into any of our definitions. They tend to be longer stays, sometimes 6 months, 2 years, maybe even longer. So they're not really the RV and they're not really the permanent house. So I think that's part of that challenge that we have now is to update our codes to look at this different type of housing. For a very long time, our codes definitely were designed around greenfield types of developments and then typical single family homes on foundations or slabs and then multifamily. And so that's part of it is having to come in and look at all of our codes, not just our land use code, but whether it's our septic or our sewers, our water, all of the things that would make that a viable unit for somebody to live in.
And as we think about just the issue of homelessness, right, that if there are ways to be creative with RVs, mobile homes, and being able to have a product perhaps with septic or making sure that that product could be workable, if that's something that we were able to do this in this community. I just think that's really important that we have some flexibility there. And you mentioned another comment, we're no longer only greenfield development, but we have infill areas.
Absolutely.
And so we've been having these conversations with SACOG about how do you develop infill areas where you already have population and businesses, but empty lots that aren't being utilized because it's too expensive to build because of infrastructure. And I know that there will be state grants probably to provide some infrastructure, but I know that that's something you're looking at and really important that we look at these infill areas and do we have to upfront some dollars as far as infrastructure to make those infill projects happen. I mean, we've talked about that here in Tahoe, but areas like Meta Vista, the Bowman area, some of those areas are parts of a SACOG project called Green Means Go, and trying to get some state dollars for infrastructure so that you can build housing in areas where then you're going to reduce the carbon footprint because you've got people living and working around job centers. Correct. So
yeah, absolutely.
Keep working towards it.
Infill is going to be probably the one thing you'll hear from me a lot this coming year.
Okay, so with no other questions from the board, any public comment in regards to the housing update? All right, we'll close public comment. Thank you, Shauna, Emily, for your presentation. Appreciate your work. And I don't think you had any action, correct? No? All right. Great. We are moving on to item 5A, which is the status report, North Lake Tahoe water-based fireworks display.
Yes, thank you very much again, Madam Chair, members of the board and staff. This was an issue of concern that has been kind of bubbling up for the past several months. So there was a request to brief your board as well as the community on the status of where Placer County and the rest of the community is on the status of the North Lake Tahoe fireworks public displays that occur over the summer months. There is no action requested today, but I expect that you'll have some public comment. So I wanted to just get started by sharing some of the background and timeline of the issue and really what happened. Concerns were addressed following a barge fire that occurred during a Labor Day or shortly thereafter, a Labor Day fireworks display at the pier near Garwood's Restaurant in Carnelian Bay. The North Tahoe, Fire Protection District issued a letter on September 13th saying it would no longer permit aerial fireworks displays. So there was concern in the business community, especially at that time. They did issue a subsequent letter in early November clarifying that the letter really was referring only to the water-based displays, not to other displays that occur in the community. The letters caused a significant concern from the community at large and really focused by the business community, which hosts three public displays each year: the North Tahoe Business Association on July 3rd, the Tahoe City Downtown Association on July 4th, and at Garwood's Restaurant and Pier on Labor Day. Placer County currently permits just about between a dozen and a dozen and a half public fireworks displays, as well as private displays on an annual basis. And this is countywide. That number includes the water-based events, of which there were 5 water-based events last year. Due to the community concern about the potential for cancellation of the public displays, the North Tahoe Fire Protection District followed up with their letters and convened a community meeting that was held on December 16th of last year. And following a lot of discussion on I'd say a wide-ranging array of topics, there was agreement by those in attendance at that meeting on 2 points. Number one, and I'd say first and foremost, ensure that the public-facing events are permitted for 2020. There was a real focus on making sure that the fireworks displays, and I think you especially heard from the Tahoe City Downtown Association during their presentation today, that it's their 75th anniversary, and wouldn't it be awful if they couldn't have their fireworks for the 4th of July this year. So real focus on ensuring that those could move forward, especially the 3 public displays. There was also agreement on need for debris cleanup and permit improvements through the county's permit process. So I'd like to start reviewing some of the steps Placer County has taken on both of those points. So our office, the County Executive Office at North Lake Tahoe, was assigned with this, and we started working with internal departments as well as outside agencies and associations. Again, number one, we're prioritizing efforts necessary to ensure that the July 3rd and 4th and Labor Day fireworks displays could occur. We also identified other issues that could be addressed, but likely at a later date, because we really wanted to focus on the summertime. We reviewed permit procedures with our responsible departments. Right now, our code states that risk management is responsible for processing the fireworks permits, but in practice, that permit processing is actually done by the Office of Emergency Services. We also reviewed permit processes in surrounding Tahoe Basin jurisdictions, including looking at best practices so that we could learn from those and apply those in Placer County. Specifically, we looked at Washoe County and Douglas County. Right now, El Dorado County and the city of South Lake Tahoe don't necessarily permit fireworks. That the fireworks for South Shore are all done out of Douglas County today. So we have some recommendations on revising our permit procedures. It is the opinion of council and shared by staff that these procedural changes don't need board approval, but if we were to go back and make changes to the code or changes to the department that was processing, we would need to go back to your board. And that's why we've kind of put that on the back burner for now and focused on what we need to do to make improvements for this summer. So the improvements to our permit procedures that we have recommended and prepared include adding a checklist cover sheet to clearly outline documents and steps required so that sponsors and pyrotechnic companies know what to expect in our process. We've consolidated what was formerly 2 different application processes into one document. So the sponsor and the pyrotechnic firm have a single application that they can both submit and both sign at the same time. So it's really clear who has what role and what responsibility. We are recommending that we change the application submittal deadline from 30 days, which is what it is today, to 60 days prior to an event to allow time for due process in the case of an appeal. We are concerned that our 30-day submittal date didn't allow for an appeal to actually occur, even though we have an appeal process. So we pushed that out a little bit to allow time for that. And then we also added a requirement to indemnify the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. That is the district that covers the eastern Placer County region in the Tahoe Basin. And then next, our major focus of improvements is in this, what we call BMP plan, Best Management Practices Plan, that relates to debris removal on the shores of Lake Tahoe as well as in Lake Tahoe. So I want to talk in a little bit more detail about that. Placer County currently is the only jurisdiction at Lake Tahoe that permits fireworks and does not require any post-fireworks event debris cleanup. And that was highlighted at the community meeting for us. So the proposed BMP plan that we have prepared and are contemplating adding to our procedural process was modeled after the Tahoe Douglas Fire District BMP plan. We did make some notable changes, though, because their plan was actually the outcome of a settlement agreement related to a lawsuit that occurred on the South Shore, and we felt that there were things in there that didn't necessarily apply to the North Shore, and that's why we used what we saw in Washoe County to kind of moderate us a little bit, and so we're kind of in the middle in most cases. While it was modeled after them, we are recommending that we not include a complaint hotline requirement. That's something that they require for a certain number of days. If somebody sees debris somewhere, they can call this number, and somebody is allegedly checking that voicemail and going out and cleaning up afterward after receiving that message. We reduced the 5-day cleanup requirement in favor of no more than 3 days of cleanup being required, or as low as 2 days. So the way we've written it, if they go out on day 1 after the fireworks and there's no debris left, and they go out on day 2 of the fireworks and there's no debris left, they don't need to undertake a day 3. If there is debris on the first day, then they would be required to go out the subsequent 2 days to ensure that there's no debris that is then washed to the shore. And our proposed BMP plan also explicitly allows volunteers to undertake the lake and shoreline cleanup as a cost savings measure to the sponsors. And that includes both the boats and their the people on the boats as well as divers. There are volunteer nonprofit dive organizations that clean up the lake as it is right now. So the language that we're proposing requires 2 manned boats during the event, clean up the night of the event, including prescription on the nets so that we're ensuring that we're cleaning up the stuff that's really there, as well as the lighting to be used for safety and effectiveness purposes. We did check with TRPA on the lighting because it seemed like what was in the Tahoe Douglas plan was pretty bright, and TRPA sent us an email saying that it was okay to use it on a temporary basis. We're also suggesting that on the following day that diver cleanup occur to capture debris at the bottom of the lake, so not just the stuff that's floating, but the stuff that is sunk to the bottom. And then again, as I stated previously, up to 3 days or until 2 consecutive days with no debris found within the prescribed distance. I do want to point out that Incline Village Crystal Bay Visitors Bureau also does fireworks, just like our business associations. Andy Chapman, who is their CEO, is here in the audience, and I have communicated with him as well as Aaron on my staff a few times as we've kind of walked through this. And he shared with me some of the work that they're doing, and they're also looking at us to see, are we implementing best practices that they could be implementing so there's consistency along the North Shore. Right now, on the day of event, Washoe County requires them to have one boat driver plus 2 people on that boat plus 1 kayak plus beach cleanup. And then on the following day, they do dive and surface cleanup on the lake and volunteers on the beaches. And we think that when we look at what Washoe County requires of them and what Tahoe, Douglas, or Douglas County requires on the South Shore, that we're kind of in the middle spot of that, but certainly would look forward to any feedback. The feedback that we have received to date, we have met with the 2 business association executive directors. I've traded a fair amount of email back and forth between Tom Turner, the owner of Garwoods, and the pyrotechnic company that he has been using for the past several years. I have had a meeting with Aaron on my staff, as well as the chief and a couple of his staff people from the North Tahoe Fire Protection District, to get feedback on our proposals, including the permit and the BMP components. One of the main concerns we've heard is regarding the cost. There is from what we can understand so far, minor increase in cost due to the indemnification of the North Tahoe Fire Protection District. North Tahoe Business Association has contacted their insurance company, and they have quoted $200 increase for that indemnification addition. Concerns regarding the number of boats and crew required, the days of cleanup required. And I did want to point out that our staff has identified funding available for this year within the Lake Tahoe Tourism and Promotions budget that could offset those costs for this first year of any additional expenses related to the BMPs. There also I've received feedback from the pyrotechnic company regarding language that was included in the BMP document, saying it was their responsibility to enforce the perimeter that is set up by the Coast Guard. I think that's something we could consider eliminating, especially if the Coast Guard has that included already. And then I received feedback from the fire district that they would like to be added to our checklist so that people know to go to the fire district. They did provide comments about their staffing capacity, especially if there are multiple barges associated with a fireworks display at maybe even different locations or potentially at the same location. They did question whether it would be appropriate or kind of simplify things to have an MOU between the county and the fire district so that we both knew what our different roles and responsibilities are. They did provide some other minor edits. So the plan is to make some amendments based on the feedback we've received to date, accept feedback today from your board and others. I would say that we recommend for the most part, sticking with the staff proposal. Because this is procedural, we are comfortable monitoring what we hear from the public display operators this year and funding their additional costs for this year and learning about things that didn't work or things that they would recommend and making those changes in a subsequent year if things didn't go well or not as expected. So we think that that can happen. Then I do just want to mention about the things that we might be bringing back in the future, the county code cleanups, potentially considering a limit on the number of private displays, either per day because of the capacity issues, or maybe even per year, because we do receive feedback when those occur about the loudness and people didn't know to expect it and that sort of thing. Their dogs are bothered or they're scared at sudden explosions in their neighborhood. I think considering the appropriate department to process the permits in the future, whether it should continue to be under risk management and OES, or potentially whether the intake and processing could be integrated with CEDRA's temporary outdoor event permit process and eliminating the OES engagement in that. I will say that Washoe County's Community Services Department processes their permits and actually issues a temporary business license to the Visitors Bureau. So I think there's precedent for that that we've learned in our region that could be considered potentially at a future date. So with that, I am done with my update and happy to answer any questions, or if you want to take public comment first, to you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gustafson, questions?
Thanks, Jennifer. I know this has been an important project to our community. Obviously, tourism services and increasing special events is, again, an area where we've utilized TOT funding routinely over the years. And I hope we can continue it beyond 1 year to continue to support these public displays. On the additional cost, I know I've seen some of the emails and probably not read them all thoroughly, but I think there's anticipated additional cost to sponsors, and I'd really like either through you or through later speakers to talk about that so the board understands the magnitude. It's so important that we take care of the lake. It's also important to honor these traditions and continue to celebrate why people come to Lake Tahoe. So.
Yeah, and we have heard kind of a wide array of estimated costs. I'm not sure if the NTBA and the TCDA are both kind of coordinating on those costs. I have heard from Alyssa that the divers, unless they find the volunteer groups, could cost $5,500, and that the boats would be $3,000 each for the 2 boats that are required during the display. So if you add those things up, I'm saying in the range of like $12,000 in new costs, including the insurance for the new BMP plan. But I did hear a higher number from Tom on the Labor Day one, and there's a little bit of a transition happening with the business associations. They've been doing some cleanup with their previous pyrotechnic company, and they've got a different pyrotechnic company who isn't doing the cleanup. So it's been kind of a transition. I think that may explain the wide range of potential new costs.
Supervisor Euler?
I'm curious as to the requirement for the boats, that you specified boat with a driver, 2 people on the boat, and a kayak.
Well, that's what Incline Village does. They have a kayak there, and I mean, Andy is here and he could probably speak to it. I think that there is, I think the kayak probably can move more swiftly in and out of the other boats that are there, because a lot of the displays attract boaters who go right outside of the perimeter, and the kayak can kind of get there and knows, okay, that landed right there, and can paddle over real quickly and grab the debris and put it in a garbage bag. That's what they're doing. It's not something we're recommending right now, but it's something that works for them that I think we could certainly consider.
Okay. When we do these shows, or when these shows are done, I should say, who controls the beach access and parking for these kinds of events?
Well, that's a great question. It's not really controlled right now, and that was part of, the display that happens in Kings Beach is at the state recreation area. Mm-hmm. Placer County has no permit authority over the state property. Right. But it certainly, causes a lot of parking and traffic challenges in the community that we don't address through our permit at all. Our permit solely looks at the fireworks only from a safety perspective. Now, I think I'd juxtapose that with what occurs in Washoe County, and you look at Andy's conditions of approval for their display on the 4th of July, and they've got barricades that they put up, and they've got tow trucks that they pay for, and they have traffic management that they do, despite where the location is, whether they're permitting it on that site, they're helping to manage some of these ancillary community impacts. I would add, however, that even though the fireworks occur here in Kings Beach, there are a lot of other beaches and places along the shoreline where people can see the fireworks. And I think there's a question of then, how would we manage those, or would it be even appropriate for us to manage those on other county-owned or state-owned beaches that people will flock to, usually by foot because they're near their neighborhoods, to watch them from a distance and not get stuck in all the traffic.
Okay. And then, so you addressed the costs associated with the boats and the kayak. The cleanup of the beach, as you were describing on 2 subsequent days, how does that get managed?
So that gets managed by the fireworks sponsor. So in the case of let's just say the July 3rd and 4th, that would be something that would be undertaken by the business associations. And I know I've talked with them a little bit about what they're thinking about. They would have their volunteers go out and do that. And on the 4th of July, there are, and 5th of July, in both Kings Beach and Tahoe City, there are a lot of cleanups that happen anyway with the League to Save Lake Tahoe, I think, sponsors them, or maybe other groups, because there's a lot of garbage that people leave behind when they show up. So they would be responsible for managing or contracting for those cleanups, either through volunteers or paying somebody to do that work.
Okay.
And then monitoring it and providing us with a log of what they find. So we have an idea of, okay, this many shells were used, and we found this many shells, so that there's some level of confidence that as much as practical or possible, a cleanup is occurring. And I think that's where we can use that data to help us know, geez, if they're not finding anything on day 2 or 3, maybe next year we don't need to do that. But because that was included in the Tahoe Douglas thing, it seemed like kind of a benchmark that they were using in maybe a reasonable way. But we do have different prevailing winds here that kind of push to the northeast, and that may not be necessary. I mean, theirs was 5 days, which is why I cut it back and recommended fewer days.
All right. Here's the reason I'm asking, kind of trying to tie these things together in terms of the beach access, parking, costs of cleanup, and all the rest. What about a program that says we are setting up a VIP area both on the lake and on the beach, and it will cost you $50 a person to get into the VIP area, and here it includes parking. If you show up the next day to help us clean up, you get refunded that $50. So if you don't, then we use that $50 as the cost or defraying the cost of cleanup, but you get great seats. You don't have to fight with everybody for your seat on the beach in order to watch the display, and you're either going to show up the next day and get your $50 back and help us clean this up, or you're not, and we're going to take your $50 and pay for a kayak guy or whatever. So how do we control the access to say, all right, community, do you want to support this kind of an effort or not? And if so, here's how the benefit inures to you.
Yeah, I think creative ideas like that are things that the business associations as well as Garwoods are trying to consider right now. In some of the locations where we've got public parking lots that we don't control, like this one out here, I think it's more challenging to say you get to park for free. But there are other ones we own that we could cordon off for that purpose. I think the business associations would, looking at Alyssa and Kylie, would be happy to consider ideas like that where they can make some money off of it. They do have some VIP.
They already do to raise the money to put on the shows, right?
Right.
So it's a great idea. They beat you to it already.
They do use some of that money to offset the
cost of the shows.
Yeah, sure. But maybe not the cleanup. But I like that volunteer piece.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I've got a quick question just for my own understanding. I was reading through the proposed regulations, and when it comes to the cleanup, like the day after the cleanup, it says, but no event shall the effort be than less than 4 hours. So the next day, volunteers are supposed to be out there for 4 hours looking for trash. I'm just clarifying.
I just took that from the existing BMP plan.
Okay, because it seems like
Tahoe Douglas uses
a bit much.
Yeah,
like
maybe
until
2
you
hours
see,
would be,
or until you see nothing else. I mean, we don't want. I don't like
Yeah.
regulations to be burdensome. I want them to be workable. We want to clean up the lake. We want to clean up the shoreline. That's really important. But I'm like, well, you have to stand around for 4 hours and we already picked up the trash, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but maybe there's some flexibility in that. I would appreciate that. I'm thinking the volunteers might as well.
Maybe we can add a clause at the end of that says what you suggest there. I like that.
That was my only comment. And then let's go ahead and just open this up to the public. That would be great. Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone would like to make a comment? Come on up.
Hi, Kylie Bigelow with the Tahoe City Downtown Association. Thank you, Placer County, for working with us. This is truly a community event, so to have so many people supporting us to move this forward for our 75th really means a lot. I just want to clarify a couple things just, for the community as they're listening. While we didn't have an official BMP through contract, we did do lots of things for cleanup. So I just want to make sure that's clear. We had volunteer boat captains cleaning up after the show. We also do have the League to Save Lake Tahoe help us clean up on the beaches. And we did initiate a hotline. It was not advertised too well. It would be on our posters, but they could call our offices and let us know if there was any trash. And to clarify on Jennifer's point, we will have only one barge this year. TCDA and NTBA, we co-own a barge, and it's steel, so it can't burn. And our pyrotechnics company this year, they bought new technology where they can remotely launch the fireworks, so there won't be an operator on the barge. They will remotely launch it from a boat. So that's more safety for their staff as well. And then Jennifer's cost recovery for this year was close. We're looking at about $19,000 in additional costs. $4,000 of that is in fireworks. Our new company is more expensive. The company we were working with before gave us fireworks at a great deal. This new company is more expensive. So TCDA, we're looking at $4,000 more for actually a little bit of a smaller show, which is disappointing. So we're looking to find more donors in the community so we have until June 1 to change and edit our contract so we can make sure our 75th is bigger and better. So thank you.
I had a quick question.
Yeah,
Maybe
go ahead.
Could I ask?
Mm-hmm.
You talked about the previous company and the current company.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain why you changed companies?
Yes, so our previous company, they opted out of the show because of this turmoil and not knowing the future of the show. We worked with them, I believe, for 3 years. I'm new, so I think 3 years. And we're going with a different company. We looked at a couple of bids. They both were shocking to see the price difference. But yeah, so we were forced to look for a new company.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, if there are any more sponsors out there, they need money. Other public comment?
Hi, Alyssa Riley with NTBA. Same with Kylie. We are looking at a $7,000 difference for a much smaller show. We're talking 300 shell difference, 300 less fireworks for $7,000 more with the new company that we're working with. It's unfortunate that we lost Zambelli, who we worked with. They were really wonderful. But I specifically wanted to thank Jennifer and Aaron and Placer County for all their time, for the wonderful partnership, for getting all these departments involved, because without this, NTBA would not have been able to move forward. This is our 41st annual show, so we've been around for a while. And we do the VIP seating area, and that does help pay for the fireworks show. And then we do the cleanups. We had divers last year. We paid for that in our BMP with Zambelli. But the difference was Zambelli covered half of our costs. So the $20,000 cleanup was covered by them. And that's where that is not happening with our new pyrotechnics company. That is on us as sponsors. And so everybody's been really understanding to our capacity. And we're looking around 20,000, 22,000. If we matched our show year for year, it would be 24,000 just in fireworks plus the 20,000 BMP. So that's 40 grand difference. So it's significant. So we're cutting way back on everything to make sure that we can still produce and put on the show. We receive all of our sponsorships from all of our local businesses because this benefits them heavily. The amount of traffic, the amount of visitors, the tourism that it brings. It's the best week of their year. And this year it's a Friday, Saturday. It's huge. And so I just thank you guys for helping us move forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else for public comment?
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Tom Turner. I own Garwood's Restaurant and am the person most responsible for all this mess. We had a fireworks show last year, and about 12:30 we looked out, and there was clearly somebody having a barbecue on one of the barges, and so we proceeded to call the fire department, which turned into the fiasco that has happened today. But although I think probably there's some good things that might come out of this. Zambelli has been the pyrotechnics company who everybody has used over the last few years. Mark Monty and I, who put on the show at Garwood's, Mark has used them in the Monterey area for the last 30 years. And John, who has run the shows, has done a fabulous job with this. And if things have changed, we've adopted and adapted to the things that the county or the fire department or whomever has asked us to do. What's the problem? The problem is that a barge caught on fire, which is not unprecedented. It has happened in South Shore. And there was a lawsuit a few years ago in South Shore that has caused South Shore to only have one fireworks show. They used to do one on July 4th, and they used to do one on Labor Day. But because the current show now in South Shore is about $125,000, South Shore has decided not to do two, understandably. The permitting process has been pretty simple. You get permits from various departments, and you put on a show, and people show up, and they have a great time. And yes, the parking has gotten more complex. The Placer County has helped alleviate that by directing traffic for half an hour or so afterwards. But people enjoy the show, and we've done so without this one problem pretty seamlessly at this point. I was visited after the letter went out from Chief Schwartz. I think he's Chief Schwartz, yeah, something like that. And he asked me, he said, what would you have done differently after he explained all the rules and the fire department and procedures and all the things that he was concerned about? And I said, well, I would have left the three guys on the barges so that if a fire started, they could put out the fire. To me, that's a baby step that could have prevented maybe all of this, and that is the pyrotechnics crew leaves people on Saturday night after the bombs are loaded, and then they left the barges about 11:45. Unfortunately, one of the barges does have wood on it. They are oil-soaked wood barges. There was a spark probably underneath, and subsequently a fire started. We were not allowed to, you want me to stop? Oh, okay. We weren't allowed to go out and put out the fire, which was, I thought, disappointing because Zambelli came right down after the fire started and wanted to go out, and they were told they could not. There's 6 fire extinguishers on each barge, but the fire department decided that would not be a wise move, I guess. The Coast Guard does not have a gun to shoot water onto the barge, at least the North Shore doesn't. The Placer County Sheriff's Boat does, but it was not deployed. And I think there could have been a lot of things and other steps. Regardless, it's come to this. We would like to continue. I know John from Zambelli has pulled out of the Kings Beach and Tahoe City fireworks mostly because of the BMPs and primarily 5, 6, 7, and then Part C, which is pretty onerous in itself, and that is if there's any violation and left open to interpretation, we're going to get charged $2,000 per occurrence, and we have to hold everybody else harmless. And I don't think anybody wants to live under that when we're trying to raise money. Now, I know we raise money for the high schools, that's fine. That's not the reason to save the lake or protect dogs' ears or do all the things that we do to try and do it. And clearly, we're only in our 7th year. I mean, if the fireworks happen, they happen. If they don't, it's not the end of the world, certainly on Labor Day. But we filled a void, really, for South Shore at this point, so something happens at Labor Day. So where do we go from here? I don't think, personally, the county should have to pay for anything. I mean, regardless of the county pays for it, we pay for it, somebody's paying for it, and money's going to some solution for the fireworks. Each year we have divers. We've paid for the divers to go down underneath the barges and pick up anything surrounding the 2 barges we use to clean up the lake bed if there's anything there. We have volunteers from the recipients of our monies that walk the shorelines. I get on my jet ski somewhere between 7 and 8 in the morning, and I go from Flick Point over to west of us and scour inside and out because jet ski is the easiest thing to get in and look at the shore. And I get a standing ovation from all the homeowners because the fireworks were great and it's all wonderful. And some people I take coffee to and whatever. But, yeah. So it's very community oriented. I don't see how in the world we're going to get to traipse across private property for 3 days after the fireworks. I just don't see the people on the shore saying, sure, come on to our property for 3 days and scour it. I have never picked up one piece of debris. I know there was a picture of somebody with some paper on their hands that picked up. I don't know if they picked it up before the volunteers got to the beaches at Garwoods and our neighboring beach. I don't know where that came from. I would assume that all the boats in the water and the people generally leave debris on the beaches. And if you get there at 6 a.m. before the volunteers get there, there's probably some debris to be picked up. But we have a great team of people that walk the beaches, me on my jet ski, driving around, making sure there's nothing, and of course then the following day. The prevailing winds in front of Garwoods come from the southwest. Everything blows right to the beach. If something falls in the water, and it's probably there the next morning for us to grab and pick up, along with cigarette butts, cigars, paper, cups, what have you. And so we've tried to do everything that we've done. But at the end of the day, if we think we're going to go out and find 2 boats of volunteers, 3 men per boat with 2 million candle power and nets to scoop up at 9:30 at night those things on the water, I don't know how long you're going to have volunteers doing that, but I would venture to say it might last 1 year because they feel sorry for you, but at some point they're going to start charging you. And I know that when they talk about from $12,000 to $20,000, or John's version of maybe $30,000 or $40,000 of additional costs, at some point it becomes ridiculous to do the fireworks. I mean, we gave the schools $25,000 last year, mostly because we just raised the money and Mark and I write a check for the fireworks. I mean, that's how it happens. We load up the fire barges, we do all the work, we have fun doing it, but at some point when the fun goes away, we might go away along with it. And I understand the concerns. I mean, I know there's people that don't like it, but for the 5,000 or 6,000 people that enjoy the fireworks, there's a few who don't, and that's the way it is pretty darn good. So All I can say is that I don't know where we get the fireworks. I know Mark and I have talked about just looking at the proposed BMPs, which is really the issues, and the requirements. And we basically said we're going to wait and see what Kings Beach and Tahoe City do before we go and try and get a permit. Because if it really gets to the point of being $20,000 or $30,000, we probably would just say thanks, and it's been a good 6-year run, and we raised some money for the schools, and that's great. But we just can't see a way through these as written to make sure that it's a viable thing. And I really don't want to write a check for $40,000 and eat it as Mark. And I think that's really where we're headed, because at some point the cost will continue to go up, and I know that people want certain things to protect against a fire, but I think there are solutions, and I think there's some baby steps you could take, because we're doing them and it's working. But I know Douglas County and Washoe County have different requirements, and that's really up to all of you to say yay or nay or what have you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Turner. Appreciate it.
Oh.
All right.
Okay.
Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, Andy Chapman with the Incline Village Crystal Bay Visitor Bureau. First, I'd like to applaud the county staff, the direction and leadership of your board in looking at this item. I think it's one that we all could work collectively around the lake and how we implement these efforts. Just a quick little background on the fireworks we've done on Incline. At the end of 2018, which was a little bit of a rough year for the prior organization that was putting on the firework and the 4th of July festivities in Incline, to the point where we almost did not have them, and they were permitted about 4 days in advance of the 4th. Our organization and our partners took over the firework component only as of last year. So my experience in the firework realm might be a little shorter term than others, but I know from working with Washoe County and some of our permitting processes, some of the things that you guys are looking at right now are the ones that we do as well. I just wanted to touch on a couple of them. It appears as if we're going to be using the same vendor that we have used for the last 2 years. Part of our requirement within that contract is that vendor does provide that cleanup that night of the event. It sounds like that might be a little bit different from the 2 organizations that are working with them right now, and it's something that might be worth discussing. But they do have a boat in the water, and they have personnel on those boats collecting with the nets during that time period. We also do have the kayak provider, as mentioned, as part of our underwater cleanup crew. That does happen. We pay about $4,000 for that. So again, another area that we might be able to look at. I'm hearing some different numbers that might be in there. We have to do quite a bit as it relates to the the land side, as it relates to medical standby, as it relates to NDOT and Nevada Highway Patrol facilities and traffic control. Those are kind of a little different as it relates to more of the beaches, and those beaches being private beaches. Unfortunately, in Incline, that do create some additional demands on us. But we are looking at what Placer County and what you guys are looking at. I think what South Shore has done is a little lot more on the heavier extreme side, and they did that due to some of the specific issues related to their lawsuit that was happening. So looking forward to the conversation that you guys will have, and ultimately where that'll end up, and perhaps we could look at some additional synergies across how we manage these on the North Shore. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other?
Can I ask
you have a question?
Andy a quick question?
Sure.
Andy, how are you funding the fireworks over there? What's the combination of funding?
So our total budget is about $110,000 for the fireworks and everything that's around that. That's this year that's $60,000 to the firework contractor specifically. So for the fireworks and that operation, how we fund it is our organization puts in about $20,000. The Hyatt contributes a large amount because they obviously are a great benefactor of those, and that is about 2/3 of the total cost, and then the rest of it is generated by local donations, anywhere from $25 to $1,000 that happens during that period of time.
Gosh, if we just had big hotels in Tahoe City and Kings Beach, then we could help fund. Oh, am I getting to the next subject?
And a big corporate hotel is good.
Corporate hotels. Okay, great. Well, thank you. And then again, just so the board understands, the rest of the board, when you say our organization, that's funded through your transient taxes?
Yes, it is. So our contribution, which is $20,000, is part of our special event operations budget.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment? Come on up, sir. And then if there's anybody after him, make your way on up so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Hi, good day. John Hagan from Zambelli Fireworks. First of all, we're hopeful we'll be back with Kings Beach and Tahoe City next year. Our board opted to terminate our relationship for this year. We needed to have deadlines in place by middle February. It wasn't clear what was going to be required. That's why we're out for this year. Hopefully we'll be back with Tom for Labor Day. The one item I'd like to address on the BMP is A3, the last line. Permittees are responsible to keep unauthorized persons or boats from entering the safety zone. Right now, that's a primary concern for Zambelli, and that's hinging our decision on whether we're going to be back for Labor Day or not. We don't feel we're in a position for enforcement, code or law. So that would be our primary concern at this point.
And in the past, that's been done by Sheriff and Coast Guard, is that correct?
I'm not sure the agency, I believe it's been a combined effort between Sheriff and Coast Guard.
I know, I've been warned to get back further, so. They had badges. I
Somebody
apologize if I
warned
don't
you,
know
huh?
which badge.
But other than that, I just think we need to have that wording clarified, outlined, deleted before we're in a position to go forward.
Thank you, good.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Thank you. We will close public comment and bring it back to the board. There's no action that's being requested. However, if there is any feedback as far as the regulations, this is the time to provide it. Anybody else? Go ahead, Cindy.
Great. I would like to ask staff to go ahead and meet again with the business associations and Tom. You know, I'm not as concerned about the private shows. What people choose to do for weddings and birthdays is on them, and I think they can afford, to deal with some of these issues. I'm really concerned about our public shows and the kind of atmosphere we're trying to provide for our visitors to the region and those sorts of expected events. And it has become a tradition at Garwood's, Tom, so many of us count on that because it's been bigger and better than even the July 3rd and 4th over here. So appreciate all the efforts that go into this, and if we can continue to meet on some of the specifics on the BMPs, I would appreciate some more clarification. And as while we want to protect the lake, we wanted to have reasonable step at this. We can always tighten it up if we find another issue, but once it's there, if we scare people away or raise too much money, then we've got to step back. I'd rather take a more gradual approach if there's some easing on some of those requirements.
And I would echo that, right? Over-regulation often then stops anything from happening. And I think it's important to have some of these because we hadn't had any of them in place. And I appreciate the feedback about what happened in South Lake Tahoe, and that was as a result of a lawsuit. And we don't have to have as stringent requirements. Of course, we want to be safe and maintain the lake, et cetera. But I think if there are opportunities where we can streamline, I think that's really important, and important to hear back from the operators as well. Any other feedback? All right, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. I'm going to stay here because the next item is mine also.
All right, this is the Placer County Tahoe Basin Town Center Economic Sustainability Needs Assessment. And that's you, Jennifer.
Okay,
Thank
yes,
you.
it is. And it looks like they're pulling up the PowerPoint, which is great. Just need to catch up and shuffle my papers around. So this is a presentation by the consultant that was engaged by the County Executive Office, and the presentation will include an overview of the work completed, and that focus on a study of 4 development prototypes for the town centers in the Tahoe Basin of Tahoe City and Kings Beach. The findings of the work that was accomplished, and then recommendations from the consultant that are contained in a draft report that was submitted to the board as an attachment to this staff report. And then I will stand up when Matt is done and provide some staff recommendations. So no further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Cauda. He is a principal with Bay Area Economics out of Davis, California. Here you go, Matt.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good day, Madam Chair, members of the board, county staff. It's a pleasure to be here to present the results of the study that we conducted. So I'll walk you through the slides. We're keeping it at a fairly high level. As Ms. Merchant mentioned, you have the complete report with all the details documented within that for your reference. So the report contents include a review of the regulatory context. It has a very significant impact on the type of development that can occur within the basin portion of the county. Some documentation of development trends to kind of look at what has been happening within the basin in terms of new development, renovations, and so forth. What are the conditions currently within the area? The main portion of the analysis is this prototype feasibility assessment, where we're looking at the financial feasibility of developing different types of development within the area and understanding whether it's financially feasible for developers to undertake those kinds of projects. And I'll detail those in a moment. From that and the research that we conducted in interviewing various stakeholders, key informants, county staff, other agency staff, and so forth, we've identified a number of barriers to investment that we think are hindering the types of development that the area plan for the basin is targeting for the area. And then we have a series of recommendations. So in terms of the status of development within the basin, there's been really limited development within the basin over the last decade. No major projects have occurred since adoption of the area plan in 2017, although you do have a couple projects that are trying to get some traction and get off the ground. The existing development that's in place is relatively old compared to the rest of the larger North Tahoe area, and tends to be of lower quality in terms of the condition, the rents that are commanded, the sales prices, and so forth. Notably, there's a declining population in the area, and this is your year-round resident population. There's a number of factors related to that, including the conversion of single-family homes into second homes, seasonal rentals, vacation rentals, and so forth. And then finally, an observation of, again, as I mentioned, lower hotel rates, lower commercial rates, which hinders the economics of developing new space within the area. Feeding into our analysis again, we identified 4 different types of prototype development projects to examine. First one is a mixed-use project that included rental apartments over retail space. The next one was a for-sale condominium project, multifamily development that would be for sale to individual homeowners. We looked at a limited service hotel concept, which would be moderate sized, something similar to a Holiday Inn Express of that sort of configuration, but not necessarily a name brand hotel. With surface parking, and then a condotel, which is a combination of a condominium development and a full-service hotel that's kind of melded together into one project that's managed centrally. And that was going to use the multifamily units above podium parking. So our findings for the analysis was that a mixed-use development with the retail below the rental residential was not feasible, and there's a substantial financial feasibility gap to where we kind of do the baseline analysis, and then we do sensitivity analysis, and we look at what variables would have to change in order to make that project feasible. And it would really take a number of favorable changes to that pro forma to try to achieve some level of financial feasibility, which is not likely to happen under current economic conditions. For the condominium project, we found that it would be feasible, typically when targeting that second homeowner market. So this is people who are typically coming from out of the region, who have high incomes, high assets, and can pay a price that supports the costly construction of those condominium units. Typically, these are selling at prices in excess of $600 a square foot, which is not something that's affordable to the local workforce for the most part. The limited service hotel project, this one we also found to be not feasible. There are very substantial feasibility gap there, so we'd need a lot of assistance in order to make a project that was strictly a hotel use work within the basin. And then the condotel project, when you meld together some of the positive economic characteristics of the condominium units with the hotel aspect, we think under certain circumstances, the right project in the right location with the right set of conditions could be feasible, but certainly not a slam dunk. So it takes some work to find the right project that could work there. Just a minute to focus a little bit on hotels and why is that something that we're looking at. First of all, there's some challenges there. The seasonal tourism pattern within the basin creates a challenge for the average year-round occupancy of hotels. And to get up above the 72% or so average annual occupancy rate that typically is what hotels need to be feasible is very challenging when you have those low seasons of the springtime and the fall, the shoulder seasons. So that's an issue. Also, when you have older properties, again, we mentioned they're sort of commanding these lower room rates because they are older, not up to modern standards in many cases. That's setting the market in a sense that a new hotel coming in that wants to kind of write into their pro forma what they think they can achieve in the way of rents has some challenges. You don't have those projects that kind of pave the way and prove that market for newer hotels. So there's a lot of perceived risk there in being the first one out with that kind of a product. In terms of the opportunities and why to look at trying to assist these types of projects, first of all, the hotels with their more frequent occupancy than, say, a second home that may only be occupied for a couple of weeks a year and a couple of busy weekends, hotels can bring more people on a year-round basis, and their spending and their stimulus within the local business community can be very valuable. Creating that demand for restaurants, retail, the various service providers in the area. Also, providing a stock of hotel rooms that's available for the visitors, you're alleviating the demand and the pressure put on those single-family homes to be converted and utilized for short-term rentals, which is this workforce housing issue that you've heard a lot about even earlier this morning. We categorized the barriers to investment that we found from doing this analysis in four broad categories. First of all, the high cost of development, some of which is just structural in nature. Labor is expensive, materials are expensive, and so forth. But there are also a number of other things that kind of contribute to the unique aspect of developing within the Tahoe Basin with the environmental concerns and so forth. Just, these things such as the BMPs that apply to construction and so forth can add costs that wouldn't normally exist in other areas that are more urbanized and what have you. The complex entitlement and permitting process. So again, multi-layered, multi-jurisdictional, a lot of review. Not only are there a lot of steps, but it takes a lot of time, and time contributes to cost of developing within the area. Because of the various sensitivities and concerns about preservation of the environment and so forth within the region, there are very complex and prescriptive requirements that really dictate how a development can be designed and configured and implemented within the area. And so that also makes it challenging for developers to take a piece of property and utilize it in the most advantageous way that helps their financial feasibility and viability. So that is an additional concern. And then finally, a range of local conditions that are not conducive to development. So this seasonal tourism pattern is a challenge. Things like the lack of workforce housing availability for the staff who need to support these different kinds of developments. The conditions generally that kind of provide an environment that looks more challenging from a business standpoint for new businesses wanting to come in. At our meeting with the NTRAC, we heard people talking about things like boarded and vacant buildings and just kind of creating an image that's more challenging when you're trying to get somebody to come in with new investment. So to address these kinds of barriers, we identified a number of recommendations for your board to consider. And again, they're grouped by those different categories of challenges that we identified. So the first category, this high cost of development, is kind of the central recommendation of the report, which is to look at your existing North Lake Tahoe Economic Incentive Program and make some modifications to it that can provide a broader toolkit for staff and ultimately your board to use in order to work with applicants to bring the kinds of projects that you're interested in seeing within this area per the area plan. This would include having a formal TOT rebate program, which would be applicable to hotel uses, which would be a mechanism to provide some TOT revenues back to hotels for, say, a defined period of time in order to help them get to financial feasibility. And then hopefully over the long term, that would be something that you'd back away from. Also, though, a series of additional modifications to provide additional flexibility in the program to look at other types of incentives and ways to facilitate these catalyst projects that you're looking to see within the area. With respect to the entitlement and permitting process, we identified some opportunities to improve some county processes, to streamline essentially for applicants that are coming in to help guide them through the process, but also to make sure that county staff who are working within the basin are very familiar with the requirements and the needs of these projects to empower them to make decisions to help move these projects forward in an expeditious manner and give them clear direction as to how they need to comply with the requirements that are very appropriate. Participating in regional efforts to address the vehicle miles travel constraints. So there's some challenges there that's creating some holdups for projects, and really understanding what needs to be done in order to make sure that projects don't get caught up in that so they can move forward. With respect to the very complex and prescriptive requirements that developments face, to look for any opportunities to increase the flexibility for applicants to design their projects in ways that can benefit their financial feasibility and just their practical feasibility, and also to make sure that it's maintaining the values and so forth that you're looking for within the region. Parking requirements are something that are quite significant, not only in terms of the cost of providing parking, which can be very expensive, but also in terms of how it impacts site design and site utilization. So there's some relatively high parking requirements for developments within the area if you're able to look at ways to create flexibility, reduce parking requirements, provide credits for on-street parking, looking at things like district parking within some of your public areas as a way to alleviate the need to provide on-site parking. there could be some significant cost savings for different types of development there. Working with the fire districts to review code requirements and making sure that there aren't any unnecessary requirements. The 30-foot setback requirement was one that we heard a fair amount about. Streamlining initial application material requirements kind of goes hand in hand with looking for ways to kind of simplify the requirements so that applicants do not have to invest in very large upfront costs to create very detailed designs and have those to review on a preliminary basis when they don't even know if they have a viable concept. So looking at ways maybe to stage that, and as somebody gets initial indication that they have a viable project, then they can up their investment once they know they're on the right track. Some of these local conditions that are kind of discouraging development. So the first thing is, again, to this issue of not seeing a lot of new development, not seeing any major projects come out since adoption of the area plan, really looking to support those catalyst projects that can provide the example that shows that a new quality project can attain those higher rental rates, can achieve higher occupancy rates and so forth, and provide the track record that other subsequent developments can ride on that helps to improve their feasibility. Using public financing mechanisms to invest in public assets, so this could be sidewalks in areas that need new sidewalks. It could be parking facilities, again, to alleviate the need for on-site parking, other kinds of public investments. This is very typical strategy throughout all kinds of communities to really look at how the public investments can spur the private investments. Recognizing limited resources available, considering targeting those impacts in very specific locations where you feel you can make the most impact, and then spur that subsequent private investment. If they're spread very widely across a large area, it's hard to make that very visible impact. So consider that prioritization and focus. It's not lost on me that part of our analysis identified that compliance with workforce housing requirements is a feasibility challenge for these employee-generating projects, because that is a very large need within the area. So what we're suggesting is, in looking at ways to alleviate that burden and requirement on the types of targeted developments that you're looking for, that be coupled with efforts to really work on the other side to help produce that needed employee housing through things like partnering to get affordable housing projects built, looking at other revenue sources or funding sources that can help to get that housing built and so forth. So it's not to say it's not a need, it's to say looking at ways to kind of shift some of the burden for helping to address that need from these commercial developments across a broader spectrum of the community. So I think those are the recommendations that I had. Turn it back over to Jennifer for her staff recommendations.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Did you care to entertain any questions from
I don't see
Matt
any
at this point?
I don't
Okay.
see any right now.
All right, great.
Maybe after
I
you're
will get
finished.
started then and maybe
Thank
wait
you.
till we're all done here. So before I get to the staff recommendations, I did want to make clear that in engaging BAE on this study, we worked directly with the Economic Development Department. And as we reviewed the draft document, sat down multiple times with Sherry Conway, our Economic Development Director, is here in the room today, Paul Griffith, the Business Development Manager, and Emily Setzer on my staff was the lead in holding everything together. So there was a significant effort to get to where we are today on this. And then there was also a lot of support from CEDRA and Public Works staff, including Steve Pedretti, EJ Evaldi, Shauna Purvines, Crystal Jacobson, and Stephanie Holloway, who took a look at the recommendations. We've had conversations, looked at the presentation, provided feedback. So what you have before you today includes feedback from multiple different departments on our staff. This also has been presented to, as Matt mentioned, to NITRAC, and will be presented tomorrow morning to the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association Board of Directors, including feedback from your board, and then to the Planning Commission on Thursday. So it's why we have a draft document, because we still have some feedback that we'll probably want to be accepting before we come up with a final set of recommendations. But to move on with those recommendations. So number one, first and foremost, as Matt mentioned, modify the existing incentives program. That is, there are three main components to that, and really modeling a TOT incentive program after some of the ones that have worked in the state of California. There certainly can be legal challenges with putting together such a program. So I actually included as an attachment to the draft report some work that was done by BAE for the city of Long Beach, California, and it goes through kind of a roster of other jurisdictions who have done similar TOT incentive programs. So our first recommendation is to return to your board within 90 days after we do get some more feedback from stakeholders in the community and have an opportunity to talk with others who are doing programs like this with a program for your board's consideration. And these would all be encompassed within the existing North Lake Tahoe incentives program. Then number two, adding all of TRPA's development rights. Right now, that incentives program is focused solely on tourist accommodation units, which is a priority with our hotels, but there are other TRPA development rights that could be used to hit on some of the challenges in the town centers, plus the challenges that we see in things like developing ADUs, which are a fairly cost-effective way for a residential property owner to make some money, but also a lot cheaper than doing a big housing project per unit. So we think there's some cost-effective things that we could try to leverage by including all of TRPA development rights, coverage, residential units, commercial floor area, and make them all available in this program. Some are available at no cost already, but other things may require transfers from other jurisdictions such as the Conservancy. And then I do want to call out the development rights available under the partnership with the Tahoe City PUD and others that were generated when we assisted in the purchase of the Tahoe City golf course. So there are other things we can do beyond the tourist accommodation units. And then the Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District, that was actually included in the existing economic incentives program. We have not had anybody ask about using that. And that was really to create infrastructure needs. And in our town centers, we have pretty good infrastructure, both on, sidewalk, lighting, landscaping through the investments your board has made in the downtowns, and also in our sewer and water. But as we get a little bit farther outside of the town centers, we've got areas where somebody might want to just do tenant improvements and they're required to construct sidewalk. Or as a village center, the community of Tahoe Vista, where there's a lot of lodging right now, they don't have sidewalks, and you see a little bit of a hodgepodge of sidewalks that were required as part of a small project approval. So there can be ways that we could really work with the developers and the business community to kind of surgically look at where our investment in infrastructure and potentially using this mechanism to pay for it could be important in spurring economic growth. And so really on this section, I'd be seeking direction from your board on proposed amendments to our existing plan in these three areas. Go on to the next one, under process, code, and policy improvements. So we'd like to seek input from stakeholders and partner agencies and return to your board with an implementation plan to cover these different areas. And I don't need to walk through them all, but I think an important component of this and actually any of the recommendations is going to be outreach to the existing community, to potential developers, and really packaging what is Placer County doing to change the rules of engagement to try to incentivize people to invest in our town centers in the Tahoe Basin. So I think a marketing program and communicating, in our region as well as externally is going to be important. I think that providing the requirement to provide detailed plan sets increases the likelihood of multiple submittals, which does drive up the cost of investment. And at the beginning end, when you don't even really know if you have a viable project, as Matt referred to. So looking for opportunities where we could scale back those requirements or do a tiered submittal of a requirement so that people aren't putting money in before they know they're feasible. And then on the next point about the fees, really looking to ourselves as well as our partner agencies to look at, are there opportunities to reduce fees, to cover fee costs in other ways so that that's not a burden for developers. And on the training piece, really helping our Tahoe-based staff understand how to apply not only county code, but TRPA code. And I think an important thing could be engaging TRPA in that regular training, as well as utilizing our experts that are on our county staff who know the code inside and out to share that information with, people at the front counter and with new planners or junior planners who are still kind of learning the ropes, that would also be important. And then really covered on the next couple slides is the parking and housing issues. So I'll go right into those. On parking standards, we're recommending that we assess and implement modern business district, or for our town centers, parking districts. And we have some great opportunities to do that right now. Public Works is in process on a resort triangle transportation plan. Part of that plan includes a parking management study that has been completed, and they have a whole series of draft recommendations that they have had at least one meeting with the business community about looking at parking districts. Now that really provides for funding to maintain parking and to make it easier for people to find parking. I think on the other side, we need to also assess our code and our area plan and exploring the possible parking management district, but also our requirements for parking, because that's something that was very clearly identified as being cost prohibitive in putting together a project. We did, when the Tahoe Basin Area Plan was approved by your board a few years ago, actually reduced the parking standards. But I think what we're learning through this study is that we may want to consider further reducing those and looking at shared parking opportunities and other things that a district would afford us to do. So we're still providing parking, but that we're doing so in the most efficient and effective way, especially related to return on investment. And then, as I mentioned, coordinating with that Resort Triangle Transportation Plan, their staff is expecting a public review draft of that in late June, and we think that will be back to your board for consideration in late August. So we'll be looking forward to that on the parking side. And then maintaining the focus on housing. Matt talked pretty explicitly about relaxing that workforce housing mitigation. We know with the Kings Beach Center, we estimated 30 new units would be required for the development project that they proposed. At $400,000 a unit, that's a $12 million project expense that they're not necessarily yielding a significant return on investment. And I think that developer is smartly looking at opportunities where they can maybe build more than they need, and we can look at things like what Aspen, Colorado is doing and having banking programs where we can work either ourselves or through a private partner and try to bank units that then another developer could use, or maybe even existing employers who need housing could buy into that to help offset some of those costs. The county has not been directly engaged in facilitating some of those things, and certainly we see from other communities who have similar problems that there are opportunities to do that, in addition to potentially, reducing our requirements in the town centers for infill projects that aren't, greenfield development. There are people already working in those businesses. So really looking at our code to facilitate some change there. Certainly, we don't want to lose progress on the housing that we've made so far. So to the next point, are there opportunities to identify funding sources to implement programs? So while we may be reducing requirements on one end, that we're keeping pace and accelerating the pace of housing development on the other hand, and working with our partners to identify sources of funding. And I think this Resort Association recommendation on the freed up TOT that would give us ideas about how to spend our money on transportation and housing would be important. And as I believe Emily mentioned in the housing work plan item, because this is all connected in a lot of different ways, looking at the Veil and Deed program or accessory dwelling unit financing or support that we can do ourselves or in concert with other partners like the town of Truckee. There are a lot of opportunities for partnering with others on funding and implementing as well. So at this point, happy to have you direct any comments to Matt or myself or others from our staff who are here today, and probably take some public comment too.
Thank you, Jennifer. Questions from board members? Robert, Supervisor Wygant.
For anyone, is there a relative ranking as to the impact of the various barriers? For example, how I'm thinking of a place like Long Beach, which we have serious shoulder seasons. They used to be called shoulder seasons anyway. So our springs and falls where the tourism is down, and maybe that's less than a place like Long Beach. I have no idea. But what is the economic relative impact of something like that as a barrier as compared to parking or the complexity of the TRP regulatory platform or something else?
Mm-hmm. I think it really varies by project and by project type. So, for example, the parking requirements for retail are quite high, and there's quite a significant impact to feasibility for a retail project due to high parking requirements, particularly if it's a restaurant use. So that may be the real key thing. For a hotel project, that is significantly impacted by that uneven pattern of occupancy throughout the year. And so that may be the higher priority for that kind of a project. And this kind of speaks to this idea of creating some flexibility within that incentive program to be able to kind of put together a different package for one type of project versus for a different project. Every one of these projects has just such unique circumstances that there needs to be some flexibility to be able to kind of target what is the real sticking point for that project and how can we best assist that in this particular set of circumstances.
So I think, where I was going with all of that is that if all of our centers were incentivized and measured in a massive Excel spreadsheet, in my mind, it sounds like we almost have to we want to emphasize flexibility as to a particular specific application and what incentives we might bring into it, depending on what its use and depending on what we desire, as compared to like having a broad policy that targets parking alone. Is that accurate?
I think so. I think that's how you're going to get the most efficient use of the resources that you do have. But I think in certain areas you could identify that parking and whether there's some real opportunities to make changes with it. So if you do have these public assets that you can use for shared parking and on-street parking and so forth, it probably makes sense to just get right out in front of that and say, okay, in this targeted area, we've got a parking overlay where we don't need to require the standard X spaces per seat or X spaces per housing unit or what have you, and just make that available to developments that are in that particular area. But you don't necessarily need or want to craft a policy that applies throughout the entire basin area where those conditions are going to vary.
Thanks.
Supervisor Gustafson.
Matt or Jennifer, I think in Jennifer's summary, it indicates the total demand. Well, we talk about the need for hotels. Obviously, that's been decades. We've been discussing this. But then you indicate the total demand for new local serving commercial space could total around 12,000 square feet. I don't see that demand right now. We've got a declining full-time population. We've got businesses closed and closing and continuing to close. So I'm concerned that new commercial shouldn't be our focus at this point. At least that's my bias. But I want to know how you came to that number.
Yeah, that was kind of looking at historic patterns, projected growth, and so forth. So it does presume there's some growth and there's some turnaround in that pattern of declining population. If you do get additional occupancy in hotels and additional hotel space coming in, that's going to contribute some demand. But 12,000 square feet is actually a very small number, particularly if you're thinking about a long development horizon. So that number would not imply that creating a lot of new space would be a priority. And I think what we heard in our last meeting at the NITRAC was that there wasn't a desire and interest in seeing ways to try to help incentivize people to renovate and rehab existing spaces that are really in need of that additional investment. And so that would involve maybe maintaining some baseline level of commercial stock. And you want to have that because when people come to stay in a hotel or stay in a condotel, they want to have things to do, places to go eat, buy things, and so forth. So it's not going to be good to completely lose that, but to maintain and improve what you have is probably the most.
Right. I guess I was getting to the chicken or the egg question, right? Because if we have 60,000 square feet that's available now that just needs renovation versus 12,000 new. So that was my thought. Yes, I agree. We'll need that, but what's going to create the demand for that, and that's got to be a change in what we're currently doing.
All right. Looks like no other questions from board members. Anyone from the public like to make a comment on this item? Nothing? I sat here all day. All right, then we will bring it back to the board. Any direction? Let's see, Supervisor Euler?
Yeah, on the issues of recommendations, I'm not, until we've spent a little time digging in a little bit deeper on the return on investments that we've made, like in the Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project, I'm not really enthusiastic about finding new places to do infrastructure improvements. I don't think we've seen what we had hoped for in the Kings Beach area when we spend $40 million of county money, and one of the biggest battles we're dealing with right now is unfortunately one of the biggest champions of that project as it was moving forward has sold his property, and now we're being told that they can't make it economically as a hotel. And so before we look for new places to sink public dollars, I'd like to see some private investment to those areas that are pointed out here, where without spending public dollars, we might be able to help facilitate new development. Obviously, I have been and continue to be a big fan of those from a process improvement standpoint. I agree looking at the parking standards could be extremely helpful, and figuring out ways to reduce the burden. Obviously, it's a coverage issue when you're talking about parking, and the parcels up here, if you can't provide the parking without creating the additional coverage, then you're going underground with it, with, of course, just drives costs exorbitantly higher. So those areas where we can do things to make it easier and eliminate the barriers without incurring costs, obviously I want to figure that out, but I'm not a huge fan at this point of looking at new ways to spend public dollars. That does not mean, I'm sorry, that does not mean I would not be willing to entertain the TOT incentive program.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Supervisor Gustafson.
Thanks for clarifying that. I can top you with going back to Tahoe City.
Tahoe City, I know.
I know, Tahoe City sidewalks where we had to.
I was hoping we're actually going to get a project in Tahoe City,
right,
so I didn't want to curse you.
Right. And really seeing that we were dealing with the drainage and sidewalks in Tahoe City back in we completed that project in 2001.
Yep.
And you look at what we've been able to accomplish there, it's been challenging. So, if I were to prioritize, because you've given us a lot of good recommendations, many of which staff should and are already working on, and I think should continue to be the focus of how we drive economic development in our town centers. But the one tool that I see, and I agree with parking, that was available in the regional plan. We didn't take as much advantage of that as we probably could have. So I would love to see that as well, parking districts. We know we have a lot of parking, but it's spread out, maybe not coordinated as well. But the number one issue is what can we publicize and really get development excited, and that's where I think the TOT rebate program. And I look at chart 150, page 157 of our board book of the subsidized full-service hotels in California since 2000. And if these communities have to subsidize their hotels, if you're looking at Anaheim, San Diego, Palo Alto, La Jolla, Huntington Beach, San Jose, if they have to subsidize their hotels to get the kind of development they want, then I think it's imperative we look at that. And the way I look at it is it's new TOT that we wouldn't have otherwise. So it's not committing necessarily what we have, although I may not be opposed to that, but what we can do moving forward to really help these projects, because then I think you'll see other commercial businesses upgrade and other demand. But we've heard this for decades now, and it's only growing with the loss of full-time population, only growing more imperative that we have shoulder season occupancy, that we have the full-service type hotels we need to drive some reinvestment in our town core. So I would prioritize that personally and expect that staff are continuing on housing, traffic, transportation, training, code enforcement, those sort, or code work with TRPA would be doing all that regardless.
That's a point well taken, and I appreciate you listing other hotels and other jurisdictions that have done this, because it's very clear that we need something that will help incentivize the hotels that we need in our community. And when we're missing opportunity, it's a real challenge. Anything from this end of the dais?
I think I just would emphasize what Supervisor Gustafson just said, because I think what I'm left with is somebody, prospective entrepreneur, investor comes in to this neck of the woods, they're going to invest or not based on their pro forma ROI, and it's coming down to, unfortunately, but for lack of something, the numbers just don't work, but the something varies depending on the use and the site. Mm-hmm. So there's no, I think what we need to do is build up some kind of a reserve that provides us flexibility, and the TOT direction seems to me like to give us the best opportunity to approach a really uncertain, sort of fragmented platform.
All right, Supervisor Gustafson.
I wanted to follow up on that. I wrote a note to myself, if not now, when? And I look at, other than the last 2 weeks with the coronavirus, our economy has been booming for 11 years, and yet we haven't seen reinvestment in our town centers. And only with significant assistance is Samir, even Tahoe City Lodge, moving forward. And that's taken a lot of public assistance and help from the county, as well as the PUD and the business community. So if not now, when?
Right.
It's on my notepad.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Thank you for coming up, and you've got work to do.
Yes, we do. That's what we like.
Thank you. All right. Looks like we have finished up the public portion. We now will adjourn to closed session again.
The board will now adjourn to closed session to consider 2 items of real property. The board will then adjourn and convene as the successor agency board to consider 1 item of real property. The board will then adjourn as the successor agency, reconvene as the board to consider 1 item of public employment, district attorney.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you next time we are in Lake Tahoe.
Games. Who cares? They're always changing. Corporation names. We just want to dance here. Someone stole the stage. They call us irresponsible. Write us off the page. Marconi plays the mama. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. It's just another Sunday in a tired old street. Police have got the chokehold. And we just lost the beat. Who counts the money underneath the bar? Who rides the wrecking ball into our guitars? Don't tell us you need us, 'cause we're the ship of fools, looking for America, crawling through your schools.
Looking out over that Golden Gate Bridge on another gorgeous sunny Saturday, and I'm seeing that bumper to bumper traffic.
Don't you remember?
It's your favorite radio station in your favorite radio city, the city by the bay, the city that rocks, the city that never sleeps.
Marconi plays the mama. Listen to the radio. Don't you remember? We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. Where have all the good men gone, and where are all the gone? Where's the streetwise earth that leads to fight the rising odds? Isn't there a white knight upon the fiery steed? Late at night I toss and I turn and I dream of what I need. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be sure and he's gotta be soon and he's gotta be larger than life, larger than life. Somewhere after midnight in my wildest fantasy, somewhere just beyond my reach, there's someone reaching back for me. Racing on the thunder and rising with the heat. It's gonna take a Superman to sweep me off my feet. A hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be sure and he's gotta be soon and he's gotta be larger than life. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. Up where the mountains meet the heavens above, out where the lightning splits the sea, I could swear there is someone somewhere watching me. Through the wind and the chill and the rain and the storm and the flood, I can feel his approach like a fire in my blood. Like a fire in my blood, like a fire in my blood, like a fire in my blood. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be soon and he's gotta be larger than life. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's gotta be strong and he's gotta be fast and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the morning light. He's gotta be sure and he's gotta be soon and he's gotta be larger than life. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. They say in heaven, love comes first. We'll make heaven our place on earth. Ooh, heaven is a place on When the night falls down, I wait for you as you come around, and the world's alive with the sound of kids on the street outside. When you walk into the room, you pull me close and we start to move, and we're spinning with the stars above, and you lift me up in the web of love. Baby, do you know that's right? Ooh, heaven is a place on earth. They say heaven. And I know, baby, just how you feel. You got to roll with the punches and get to what's real.
You guys ready? The board met in closed session to consider 2 items of real property. On both, the board heard a report and provided direction. The board then adjourned as the Board of Supervisors and convened as the Placer County Successor Agency to consider 1 item of real property negotiations. The Successor Agency Board was provided a report and provided direction. The Successor Agency then adjourned and reconvened as the County Board of Supervisors to consider 1 item of public employment, District Attorney. The board provided directions on interview procedures. This concludes the report out of closed session.
Madam Chair, I just want everybody to know that it's Greg Courier's birthday today, so.
Happy birthday, Greg. And with that, we will adjourn to our next meeting on March 24th. Thanks, everyone.